What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is a story where Izuku had Erasure-Telekinesis Quirk. Erasure Head never got to meet his kid. Inko was killed when his kid was only 12 as he disappears in a year after a new vigilante arises. Many say his quirk is telekinesis, others say it's Erasure, his name is Deku. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into the story. Headphones on as the world is shut out. A boy with raven hair walks through the crowd of people to see a villain. Heroes were on the scene. The boy's forest green eyes watch as the battle unfolds through his black-rimmed glasses, taking note of the heroes. A surgical mask over his face covered from the bridge of his nose to his chin. He wore a black hoodie and army green cargo pants with bright red shoes. He watched as a rising star hero arrived at the scene about to take down the villain, only to have the spotlight taken by a debuting hero. The boy sighed at the new heroine. It was another one of those heroes. He thought to himself as he left the after. He was mildly aware of the new heroine sticking her butt out shamelessly. He truly wondered why they do this for attention. Fame, money, and so forth, all are nothing things that didn't seem to interest the boy. What interested the boy was seeing the man that killed mother to put behind bars. But no one can help him. The blame was put on him by his murderous stepfather. Izuku was the name given to him by his mother. Midoriya was the name of the man took his mother away, pinning the blame on him. The revelation of him knowing the vile man wasn't his father was the day he got his quirk, the day Hisashi Midoriya kicked him in the gut, while yelling he was the son of the bastard underground hero. His mother told him that his real father was a kind man who would protect them. Izuku asks why they are not with him, and so his mother says it because if they were Hisashi, or better known as a flame hero dragon, would kill them all. Izuku understood his mother. He did press on about the topic because he knew the man would hurt him, his mom, and then go after his real father. The day the hero killed his mother was the day Izuku's world shattered. He was always bullied, then came home and was abused by the vile man, and so he almost went insane when he found his mother's body lying on the floor of their apartment with multiple stab wounds. Izuku didn't know what to do, and so he ran till he was out of breath. After staying homeless for a while, he decided to take his bully's advice and jump off the roof of a building, but was saved by a man who was like mist. Then said man was a villain by the name of Kurojiri. When he told Izuku he was a villain, he was surprised the boy didn't seem to mind. Izuku was broken. The world was unfair. His reply to Kurojiri was, "Heroes, villains, what's the difference? We live, we die, we take lives, we save lives, we're just human." To say Kurojiri was shocked was an understatement. He was paralyzed. He learned the boy had been bullied for years at a young age. Grew up being abused, a man who shared no ties with him, and his only lifeline had been taken away from him, and the blame was put on him. Kurojiri raised and trained the boy for 2 years. He still wondered how and why the villain Kurojiri worked with didn't question why the warp gate was disappearing and then coming back when called. He wondered if they even know of his existence. Izuku reminisced as he made his way back to his apartment. He had become an info broker. He knew things he shouldn't know and knew things no one else knew. He wondered what his life would be like if Hisashi Midoriya was never in it. It would have been better. Izuku was trying to look up evidence that shows that the damn hero was the one who killed his mother, but searched to no avail. He was supported by Kurojiri. The villain didn't think about keeping him a secret. It just was something that was left out in the open and nobody saw it. Kurojiri was Izuku's guardian figure. He somewhat shared his ideals. Everyone was only human. Izuku mostly slept that day. There was no request, and he was a vigilante that mostly was active at night. When he woke, it looked as though the day was ending. He knew that kids his age would be returning home from school. He didn't have to go to school. His was smart for his age, smart enough to hack into highly secure government and non-government agencies without any way to be tracked. Being bullied caused him to turn to books. He remembered the saying, "Knowledge is power," and so he consumed it. He decided to take a walk before become the vigilante he was. During that walk he heard an explosion. That explosion reminded him of someone. All explosions do. He then remembered his childhood friend, his bully. Out of curiosity he made his way to the scene. He saw heroes panicking and saying that their quirks weren't suited for this, and that the hostage probably wouldn't make it. Izuku felt like face-palming, and so he did. The villain was a sludge. The stench attacked his nose and he felt like throwing up. The explosions was being caused by the boy. Izuku sighed and walked to the front. Everyone eyed him curiously. He stretched his hand and then his fingers bended in. Just then the hostage was pulled out from the villain and flew straight into Izuku's outstretched hand. He caught him by the collar and Izuku didn't notice that it was a spiky blonde. With his other hand he did a couple of movements, and the crowd and pros watched as the villain floated up. Izuku slammed him onto the wall, to the ground, to the opposite wall, and repeated until the flames were out and the villain was unconscious. The boy he was holding was in shock, as was the heroes and crowd of civilians watching. "What are you waiting for?" apprehended the villain. The boy he was holding snapped his head up to his savior, and a look of shock was written all over his face in recognition of his voice. Izuku finally realizes who he is and drops him, and runs from the boy. Bakugo Katsuki. He chases after him only to no avail. Izuku uses his quirk and pushes himself off the ground and onto the building, where he then starts to get further away. Everyone is left dumbstruck, but Bakugo was left with pure hate. He believed that Izuku Midoriya killed his mother and ran. He saw the woman as a second mother. How could he not feel like taking on the responsibility of bringing him down? He labeled Deku a mother killer, pitying the flame hero that had a villain's son. No one believed Izuku. Only two people. His true father, who found out about his existence when the love of his life that he had lost died, and Kurojiri, a villain who had saved him. That night was peaceful. Izuku sat on the edge of a building looking down, and then, "What are you doing, kid?" Erasure Head was doing his rounds, and then he saw a kid. He wondered what he was doing out so late. He should be around his son's age. The said boy was currently missing. He didn't believe Dragon the slightest bit, and was looking evidence to tie him the death of Inko. At the moment now focused on the boy before him, his instincts told him to be cautious. Izuku knew if he turned he would come across one of the few heroes he respected, Erasure Head. Izuku was in a tight spot. He was wearing his vigilante costume after all. Black hoodie, sleeves just stopped above the elbow and black elbow-length fingerless gloves, blank pants and red shoes, metal mask and black cap. Erasure Head recognized him as Deku and tried to grab him. Izuku jumped off the building and used his telekinesis to ease his landing. On solid ground he began to run. Erasure Head chases after him. He was only doing his job. He remembered that Mike was also on patrol and called for backup. After a while of chasing, Izuku tried to make an attempt to lose him and cuts into a corner only to be greeted by another hero. "Well, what's up?" President Mike shouted, blasting Izuku back. He erased his, but the force from the blast caused him to hit his head against a brick wall. Black spots clouded his vision and he was out. Well, that was the end of his vigilante spree, he thought. When he woke up he was greeted by a bright light. He was in a hospital room. He tried to move his hands. They were cuffed to the bed. Izuku let out a laugh. This was humiliating, he thought. Great, just great. He hasn't lost his sanity. Well, no, completely. Then the door opens and Erasure Head, President Mike, another guy, and Igenium with Midnight. Okay, what's this lineup of heroes? Izuku thought to himself. Firstly, me and Mike caught you. She was around and he is better with kids like you, Erasure Head said, gesturing to the night-looking hero. And he's a detective that will be asking you questions. Izuku had pretty much figured out the other guy was a detective. Well, I'll be asking the questions though, Ingenium said with a smile in his voice. Just hurry up and question me and put me away for all I care, Izuku told them. His eyes looked dead, the bags under his eyes shouting out he hasn't had enough sleep. The pros and the detective were taken aback by what he said, and so the pro hero began the questions. The human lie detector stood silently and listened, he said. He knew who he was. Many labeled him as the mother killer, Izuku Midoriya. Well, what's your name? Izuku. True. Your last name? A scowl grew on Izuku's face as he said, Midoriya, by law not by blood. True. This made all the pros confused, all except Aizawa. Naomasa noticed and would ask about it later. What do you mean not by blood? I'm the child of my mother's ex-lover. We couldn't run to him because the bastard that killed my mom would have killed us all. True. Who killed your mother then? If I told you, he wouldn't guarantee the life of my only family member that is left alive. True. Naomasa now knew enough. The kid wasn't a murderer. Well, not yet at least. Have you ever killed someone? No. True. Though I did beat a couple of people half to death. True. Like who? Villains, bastard heroes, Endeavor. True. Naomasa began to sweat drop. Did he actually do that? He was starting to wonder if his quirk broke. Is that even possible, though, he wondered. Your quirks. Erasure and telekinesis, both from my parents. True. Erasure. Everyone looked at Aizawa as he just shrugs. Tell a lie, the detective spoke. The number 1 flame hero and number 2 flame hero don't beat children. False. At the moment, everyone was confused. As it seems you're innocent when it comes to murder, but your vigilante work has put in a tight spot, the detective spoke up. But since you're telling the truth about most of the things being asked, you could be let go considering you're still a minor. By the way, who takes care of you? I live alone, but I have a guardian figure that pops up from time to time. True. Do you know who he is? Yes. True. Who is he? A villain. He saved my life. Oh, don't worry, he's the type of good villain that had a reason to be a villain. In fact, it's thanks to him I didn't become one. True. I'm not going to answer any more of your questions, but I'll tell you this. He's the only villain I had been in contact with. That, and the ones I beat half to death. True. Also, I don't know where he's at. He just literally pops out from nowhere after I tell him where I'm at. True. After all the questions, the pros left, and Izuku waited for what might happen to him. When the pro that taking him down came back, he brought with him some shocking news for Izuku. You'll be attending UA in 10 months and I'd become your legal guardian, said Aizawa Shoyuta. Izuku had a smirk as he got dressed after what felt like being chained to his bed for a week. What is there to be shy about? We both know you're my dad. Erasure is a rare quirk after all. For 2 people in the same area to have with an age difference of 22 years can't just be a coincidence. I'll give it to ya, you're smart. Though the part where you meet to go UA is shocking. He turning around. You go a month after everyone has settled. Apparently I'm going to be your homeroom teacher as well. 11 months and a week later. And so that what happened? Izuku was in rehab. He stood in front of a ludicrously large door and waited to be called in. Aizawa was making it known to the class that they were going to have a new student. We're going to be taking in a new student. The class began erupting into murmurs about who might be the new student. Sensei, did that person take the exam? Lita Tenya, the class president, asked. No, not exactly, Aizawa replied. That's unfair. Some of us almost died in that exam. Is just taking some free ride. The class broke out into a chorus of complaints, instantly silenced by their teacher when got pissed. The reason he'll be here is because this is a rehabilitation project. Anyone who knows who Deku is. The class went quiet. Aizawa noticed Bakugo cringed at the mention of the name. Apart from that, many of the faces had gone pale. Are you talking about the vigilante that goes around beating people half to death? Kirishima Ijiro asked. So you've heard. Who wouldn't have? The guy gave the number 2 hero a beatdown. Well, whatever. I want you all to try and get along with your new classmate. Especially you, Bakugo. Get in here already. The class was shocked by their teacher's sudden stern tone. The door slid open and a mop of black hair with green highlights and forest green eyes walked in. He had a slender build, quite tall, and his eyes were dull, dead-looking. Bakugo was the first to react and launched at him. He had more experience. This felt like putting down rabid dog. Izuku was fast, faster than Bakugo. He slammed him against the wall and held him up by the neck. Would you look at that, I didn't have to use my quirk. It's been a long time, Kaken, he said, the name with venom dripping of his tongue. You know, I really wanted to tell you that I took your advice and jumped off a roof. It was the same day my mother died. You know I lost it then, and you're one of the causes of me losing my sanity, he whispered to Bakugo, malice dripping of every word. Izuku. Izuku turned to see Aizawa. His eyes were red and hair stood on end with his scarf. Hiya, hi, Izuku said, dropping Bakugo to the floor and walked to the front and stood beside his father. He scanned the class he would be stuck with. I'm Aizawa Izuku. I'll be attending class with you all, he said with a monotone voice. Aizawa. Fucking shitrag, you fucking took in a motherfucking killer. A fucking villain, Bakugo shouted. Izuku was about to strike, but Aizawa was faster. His bindings wrapped around Bakugo and pulled him in. Aizawa was mad, almost beyond reason. You're not so innocent compared to Izuku, Aizawa said, staring down at Bakugo. The class grew quiet and stared in fear at their teacher. Izuku didn't kill his mother. And don't ever call my son a villain, he snarled at Bakugo, then sent him to his seat. The class was quiet, and so Izuku continued. Anyways, my quirk is telekinesis and erasure, and I'm also this guy's biological son. Call me a secret love child, I don't care, he said with a smirk and took an empty seat behind Bakugo. The class was given a free period and decided to finally approach the elephant in the room. Aizawa-kun, you wouldn't mind if we inquire about you? Lita Tenya, the class president, asked. Not at all, Ask away your questions, Izuku said with a smile. How do you know Bakugo? Uraraka Ochiko asked. We knew each other since childhood actually. In fact, he was the one who. Shut the fuck up, Deku. Bakugo snarled, slamming an explosion on Izuku's desk. What are you going to do about Kaken? Izuku shot a glare. I'm just telling them my origin story, Izuku told him. Or should I tell the class yours? Izuku asked as he jumped back when Bakugo tried to grab him. Yo Baku bro, calm down. His not worth with. A redhead says, pulling him by the shoulders. Bakugo scoffed and turned. You'll always be a fucking weakling and a villain. Izuku laughed. He broke out into a fit of laughter. He just couldn't take it. People slightly backed up, except Uraraka. That's so funny coming from you, he said between laughs. What's so funny? Ashido Mina defended. She was angry and many of her classmates had never seen their happy-go-lucky classmate mad. It's just him calling me a villain, Izuku replied. So what? From what we heard, you're a villain. Do you know the origin of Deku? Izuku asked. Has Bakugo ever told you? How the heck would he know? Kaminari Denki asked. Shouted. I came up with a name, Bakugo told them. Izuku just laughed. You really did grow soft. What happened after I disappeared anyway? The bastard pinned the blame on me, didn't he? I'm starting to think all Flames heroes are just motherfucking bastards. Most of them share the same personalities. Abusive motherfuckers. You weren't that much different, Kaken. That's going a little too far, Kirishima butted in. Say, has Kaken ever told about the only friend he had since childhood? Mina got pissed and went in for a slap, but Izuku simply stepped back. We know about it, so don't fucking make fun of him. How long have you been friends? Izuku asked as he turned his back. 2 years, and we know enough to know that he feels bad about letting go about his only friend. Not enough to believe him though, Izuku shot back. Say, Kaken, how did you make yourself look like some fucking victim in all of this? Izuku asked, almost innocently almost. What did he about what he did to his friend? He asked. He pushed away and didn't help him when he needed. Why are you even asking about this? Let's just, we both knew the same kid. Everyone listening somewhat gasped. And that kid has died, he said with a smile. His death was really ludicrous if you asked me, Izuku said with a laughter. Many in class began to just see Izuku as a villain. This was for the best, he thought. He didn't need pity. But some had a different looks in their eyes. Izuku just shrugged it off. And finally it was lunch. He made his way to the roof. When he opened the door, he found Todoroki. He closed the door and left. He wasn't in the mood to try anything with him. As he was wondering, he was approached by Uraraka. Izuku, why don't you have lunch with us? She asked. Lita was beside her. He looked as though he wanted to protest but then decided against it. Izuku just shrugged and followed along. They sat at an empty table. People had been taking glances and were wondering who the new guy was. Izuku-kun, I'm sorry, but I must reprimand you for making fun of the death of a person. Lita finally spoke. Lighten up a bit. The kid was a useless good-for-nothing bastard anyway. It's better if he's dead. Izuku's comment made Lita mad. How Izuku spoke completely went against all that Lita believed, but before he could say anything, you that kid, aren't you? It was more a statement than a question when Uraraka said it. Lita was speechless. This caught Izuku off guard. The seriousness in her eyes reminded him of his mother. You're quite sharp, Izuku complimented. I can spot a smile that's trying to hide something from miles away, she says. You're not fooling me. Izuku chuckled and looked at how serious she was. Can I hear your origin? She asked, and so he obliged. Lita sat and listened. Back when I was a kid, I was quite small for my age. My mom had a friend since birth, and so they thought it'd be a good idea for them to have their kids become friends. And that was when I met Katsuki Bakugo. We practically grew up together. We used to be really good friends, but everything changed when he got his quirk. You could say his pride took over. The more praises he got, the more big-headed he got. As a late bloomer, I was labeled Deku, meaning useless. When I finally got my quirk, or in my case quirks, you could say Kaken sorta lost it. His bullying became more violent, and every day was worse from the last. Home wasn't that great either. Hisashi made it a living hell. Izuku said, banging the table. This made Lita and Uraraka jump. But Izuku quickly composed himself. We couldn't go to my real dad because my mother's marriage was a damn quirk marriage. But after having me, my mother could no longer have any more children. Being Aizawa's kid, Hisashi said to throw me in an orphanage, but my mother refused. And so that began my hell. I found out I wasn't his son around the same time I got my quirks. And so could say with Bakugo and Hisashi, my 8 years of hell had begun. And so when I found my mother's body with multiple stab wounds lying on floor of our home, you could say it was the cherry on top. I lost it, and not knowing what to do I ran. I broke. Then I remembered something Kakin told me, so I took his advice and did it. But I failed, and so here I am. What did he tell you to do? Surprisingly, it was Lita who asked. Nothing to concern yourself about, Izuku said with a smile. You don't have to worry about it, Izuku tried. Aizawa-kun, Izuku let out a sigh. He didn't like lying. He didn't like those who lied or told half-truths. He made it a rule not to lie, only when necessary. Take a swan dive of the roof and wish for a better life in the next life, he quoted, and as though by cue. Fucking Deku, what are you doing here? Bakugo said loud and clear for the whole cafeteria to hear. Being the kind-hearted person she was, Uraraka was the first to stand up to defend. But to her surprise, no, to all of them it was Lita who made it to Bakugo first. Believing he'd start giving a lecture, Bakugo and all didn't see the punch coming. Lita punched through back Bakugo into his squad. What the fuck, man? Kaminari shouted. You bastard, Bakugo shouted and thrust out his hand, but nothing came. He looked over to Izuku, and saw his eyes were red and hair was floating. The fuck did you tell them? Bakugo growled. My story, was all Izuku said. Bakugo just glared a death glare and stormed off. Thanks, Lita. I heard from my brother you don't lie. Oh yeah, your brother is ingenium, Izuku said with a smile. Uraraka noticed it was a real one. Lita seemed to beam and brightened up. Your brother is one of the only heroes I respect and look up to. Him, my biological father. All might, present Mike. No wait, his an if. Why not? Lita asked, trying to defend their English teacher. Well, his reason for being a hero. He didn't do it for the fame and money. It was somewhat to help people, but his main was just to scream at people. He said he thought screaming at people for a living would be fun. At his fun, he's a good guy on my list. Lita and Uraraka's sweat dropped. So what made you become a vigilante? Uraraka asked. Everyone pinned the blame on me for my mother's death, and so I decided to look for the person myself. What do you plan to do when find that person? I'll try not to kill, that's for sure, but I can't be that certain, Izuku replied. Lita and Uraraka just sweat dropped. Izuku didn't plan for this, to talk with people his own age. He never expected them to be the first to approach him. But Izuku had to leave them aside for now. He was more focused on his revenge. Izuku didn't tell anyone who killed his mother. He wanted to bring that monster down himself, in the most worse and brutal way he could think of. In a way that would make those who looked up to him want to kill themselves for just admiring him. He was already collecting information on him. He's already got a lot of information on him sleeping with numerous women. Has a lot secret love childs here and there. He was planning on making it really big, broadcasted all throughout the city, all throughout the world perhaps. That day they were having a hero training lesson. Izuku was told that it was All Might that was the teacher. To say Izuku wasn't excited would be an understatement. The boy was glowing with excitement. The students had already known the man for a month. Lita and Uraraka thought it was refreshing to see someone. What they all didn't know was this was a test for Izuku. Nedza planned out a test for the young vigilante. They wanted to see if Izuku still had the heart of a hero, but that was to be held on a later date, because at the moment All Might had used up his time. Information from Bakugo told them Izuku had always wanted to be a hero. If he proves them that he still wants to be a hero, then would allow him to get a provincial license. Izuku had been out on the streets for some time after all. 4 years of being a vigilante could be enough experience he needed. When All Might didn't arrive, Izuku felt down. Many of the students felt disgusted. Bakugo glared at him. But Izuku ignored him. He ignored them all. Aizawa told the class he would take over for now. Everyone was told to get into their hero costumes. Izuku was going to wear his vigilante outfit, but Aizawa had sent it to the support department to have it slightly upgraded. Izuku already looked like his biological father. His costume just added the cherry on top. His costume was just like Aizawa's, retaining the short sleeves, the gloves, and the hood from his original design. There was also the metal mask. He added the cap. Deku, you look like Mr. Aizawa, Uraraka said, looking surprised. I am his son, Izuku said in a monotone voice, the tone saying, so what? When they arrived at their destination, Izuku noticed it was a facility, that bunch of different zones. It was the USH. They were greeted by another hero, 13. Izuku began to fanboy at seeing another of the heroes he looked up to. It seemed as though all the heroes Izuku looked up to were teaching at this school. They must really want new and true heroes to rise up, and that's why they were teaching. Izuku suddenly got a text. It was from an unknown number. Izuku knew it was Kurojiri. There will be an attack. And as though by cue, the warp gate opened. Cool, you guys got fake villains, Kirishima said, sounding excited. They're real, father and son said in sync. Everyone turned to them. Bakugo trudged up to Izuku and grabbed by collar. It was you, wasn't it? He snarled in his face. Of course you'd think it was me. Tell me, would I really sabotage having a nice and warm home, a father and a chance of proper education? He asked sarcastically. 13 Protect the kids. Aizawa didn't have time for these kids' nonsense. He jumped down and attacked the weak villains. A grin spread across Izuku's face as he pushed his hair back. This guy's really cool, Izuku said, and jumped down after him before 13 could even stop him. Izuku knew that Kurogyari was going to spread out the hero trainees. Everyone recognized Izuku as Deku. Some were pretty pissed. Aizawa was really impressed at how the kid was handling himself against the horde of villains. He noted some of them were really mad. Deku charged after the one that looked like the boss, knives in hand. Aizawa was sure he had taken all of them away. Deku launched and swung at Shigaraki Tamura. Why is Deku here? You know, I've been asking myself that the whole time, Deku replied. Shigaraki kept on dodging knife swings and kicks. He had enough grab Izuku's face. He could have dodged, but his inner madman wanted to see his reaction, even though most of the villain's face was hidden by the severed hand on his face. Izuku's hood fell back. His cap had fallen off and his mask was down, a shit-eating grin on his face. Shigaraki's quirk wasn't working. You're just like Erasure Head. Deku, Erasure Head called. Shigaraki jumped back just as he did. He was back to back with Erasure Head. Would it be wrong to say I am enjoying this? Izuku said as he charged after a villain. He gave a roundhouse kick and the villain went flying. Aizawa merely grunted. Izuku was a bit too slow at dodging a punch. Erasure Head arrived on time and punched a villain. A mutant jumped at Erasure Head. Izuku swung multiple knives. Erasure Head was going to ask where he kept them later. Deku, you're Erasure's kid, aren't you? Shigaraki asked. So the bastard was another Erasure Head. A villain growled and launched at Deku. This was one that was waiting for his turn to attack. The villain had one eye. The eye he lost gone and nothing but an empty socket was there. Izuku may have and may not have been the cause of it being empty. Someone had started a fight and the madman in Izuku came out and took out the guy's eye. He launched at Deku, but Erasure had slammed a fist into his face and sent him flying. Shigaraki was now the last one standing. Izuku's eyes were already bloodshot. His head was pounding from using telekinesis. Aizawa charged after Shigaraki. The villain a punch the hero blocked. He shot up an elbow and the villain blocked. Get away from him, Izuku shouted. Aizawa was a bit too late as his elbow began to crumble. He jumped back, villains launched for him, but Izuku used his telekinesis and swung them back. Both Aizawa and Izuku stood back to back. By the way, I'm not the last boss. In that moment a dark shadow loomed over Deku and Erasure Head. Aizawa was struck down, and Izuku held by the head. He struggled to break free but was no match for the beast's strength. Both Aizawas had Erasure active but nothing was happening. Noma has multiple quirks, your Erasure won't work against him, the villain said with a laugh. Aizawa-chan. Ajui's voice came and then her tongue. It wrapped around Izuku's body. Shigaraki turned to the girl and a boy and charged at them. His hand reached out to them both, waiting for them to fade away where his touch landed. Nothing happened. Izuku could barely keep his eyes open. Ajui pulled him away from the monster, Aizawa suppressing Shigaraki's quirk. Ajui jumped back with Mineta under her arms, pulling Izuku along with her. Wait, no, Erasure Head, Izuku shouted. Put the boy down, and pulled back her tongue. With all the strength he could master, the vigilante thrust his hands forward. With telekinesis he lifted up the monster from the badly wounded pro-hero and began slamming it against everything. Mineta and Ajui cringed. The vigilante was using so much force that a normal person could have been nothing but paste. What the fuck are you waiting for? Get him away from here, Izuku shouted at the frog girl and the shaking boy. Ajui managed to pull their teacher and the two students started making their way back to safety. Izuku kept on using his telekinesis and Erasure, making sure the hand villain doesn't get him, using the monster's body as a weapon and a shield. Izuku was losing strength and fast. When the doors burst open and a booming voice came, he was relieved. The Nomu broke free and grabbed Izuku by the head, attempting to crush it. In an instant the boy was on the ground, head still together. The dark-haired boy looked up to see the number one hero protecting him. Izuku tried to get to his feet, but his pounding head and bloodshot eyes kept him grounded. All Might began his battle with the monster. The boy was glad that the villain was too preoccupied to focus on him. Kurogyari came back. The villain didn't bait much of an eye at the vigilante teen. All Might was about yo slam the monster into the earth, but then the warp gate opened up a warp and saved the beast. Izuku gritted his teeth. Shigaraki Tamura began his rambling. Izuku was getting annoyed. The monster moved its hand to what looked like All Might's weak spot. The Nomu, what it was called, dug his fingers into the wound from long ago, reopening and causing damage. Izuku was about use it, his own original quirk, a quirk none of his parents or known family members had. He was about to save the hero that only wanted to protect. The hero needed to be here to protect the others he was about to when suddenly the temperature dropped. Ice skidded out from nowhere and encased the Nomu. The teen stared in surprise as the dual-colored hair boy appeared. He noted he was the son of the hero he almost killed last time. Two more came. Bakugo appeared and created an explosion pinning down Kurogyri. Kirishima tried to hit Shigaraki, but the villain was quick to get away. Bakugo had a hand on Kurogyri's metal container, the thing that contained his physical form. What it was the boy didn't know. Shigaraki was now the only one standing. His rambling continued until he finally snapped. "Nomu, get our ride back," said Shigaraki. That moment everyone was too stunned and too slow to move. All Might wasn't fast enough. Bakugo took the full brunt of the Nomu's power. The force blew everyone back. Everyone stared in horror as the dust began to clear up. Tears began to drip down Kirishima's eyes. His best friend. His best was no more. "What?" came Bakugo's voice. Everyone turned to see the boy on the ground next to Kirishima. All Might hadn't moved from his spot. The warp gate was back at his leader's side. If Kurogyri had a face, he would horrified, and broken, shocked, and in pain. The vigilante he had saved and had grown fond was not in his place. The boy with the explosion quirk didn't take the blow. All Might was still where he stood when he escaped the Nomu's hold. A cackle came, then crazed laughter. The ground began to shake and all of a sudden things began to float. Shigaraki panicked as he was raised off his feet. Rocks, trees, water began to float. Everything in the USJ began to float as the laugh grew louder and louder. The dust finally cleared, revealing the vigilante. His bloodshot eyes were wide open as he cried tears of blood. His laugh echoed throughout the building, chilling everyone to the bone. He was covered in blood from head to toe. His blood. Why did I jump?" Izuku began in a sing-song tone. Izuku wasn't present. Izuku's eyes were dull and dead. His body moved on its own. His mouth spoke the words that repeat in his soul. Why did I jump? Why was I saved? I'm useless, I'm weak. I remember the saying plus ultra. Go beyond your limit. I wanted to be a hero. Why did Kaken hurt me? Why did Mom have to go? A pure soul was lost that day. And everyone blamed me. Why should I be a hero? For a society that doesn't believe me. I laugh, I cry. I'll go beyond my limit. I killed myself. And so I'll kill you. As Izuku said those words, Izuku activated Eraser. The Nomu began shaking. It began shrinking, skin turning back to human, a cranium encasing the exposed brain and eyes finding sockets. It became a normal human. Shigaraki panicked. Kurogyri was already moving. Izuku didn't care. He was going to hurt that monster in the most painful way he could. The warp gate warped away with the villain and left Izuku to the heroes. The now normal human wasn't human. He was an empty shell. They watched horror as the Nomu was ripped apart. Blood spilled onto the ground as everything began to drop down. All Might didn't know how to deal with this situation. All three students present began to gag at what they had just witnessed. The black-haired teen was laughing maniacally and began crying as he laughed. All Might felt pity for the boy. He was a hero. And right now, even though the best thing that had to be done was subdue the boy, he just stood there and watched the boy break down. The boy needed help. His dull dead eye reminded him of himself when he lost his master. Why aren't you dead? I killed you, should be dead. No one wanted you. No one saved you. The person who was always there for you is no longer here. Why did you come back? You took the swan dive. Just die. Izuku pulled out a knife and tried to stab himself in the eye. He didn't get the chance. Todoroki encased the vigilante in ice, as quickly took it away. The boy went limp. Put cold. Fully unconscious. Bakugo just stared in horror at the boy. He questioned what happened to the dark-haired teen informant of him. Why, how? He questioned himself. What happened to Deku? Is this really him? Was this my fault? Bakugo's breathing had hitched. He was having a panic attack. A large hand placed itself on the boy's shoulder. He looked up to see All Might. It's not too late to fix your wrongdoings, he said to the boy. Deku doesn't look good. Kirishima shouted, gaining all their attention. All Might was first to move. picking up the broken boy. Was he this injured? All Might asked himself as he rushed out. The other teachers had finally arrived and everything was being taken care of. No one else apart from the 2 teachers and the vigilante was hurt in the attack. All were in serious condition but was able to be stabilized. All Might got his friend a detective to look into young Aizawa's past, though he didn't have to since he was already on the case. The detective as well had begun to find interesting things. Deku woke to the feeling of being constricted. He groaned in pain as he sat up. He was bandaged from head to toe. He was sure he looked like a mummy. He opened his eyes to see an actual mummy on the bed in front of him sitting up. "Erasure Head?" he questioned. Aizawa replied with a grunt. "Dear God, you look like a mummy." "Oh yeah, well I'm looking at one right now," the man retorted. Deku hummed at Eraser's comment. A loud growl suddenly came, then there was a moment of silence. Under all the bandages Izuku had a serious expression. Aizawa was raising a brow. "Was that you?" he asked. "Shut the hell up. It happens when I use my other quirk." An irk mark appeared on Aizawa's head. "You didn't tell us about all your quirks he asked in a menacing tone. "In my defense you guys asked for what my quirks were, not how many there was. And that quirk is very dangerous." The voice of an older woman came. Both Aizawas turned to see Recovery Girl walk in with a clipboard in hand. The quirk is called Limit Breaker. Basically it breaks all the brain limiter. All limits in your body break: your strength, intelligence, your regeneration ability, and your quirks. The hero explained. "It's an original case. It's quite rare and usually would happen to people whose parents have powerful quirks. This just confirms that it can happen to anyone and is a 1 in a million case. You're lucky you managed to heal most of your most fatal injuries, otherwise you would have been dead. You both went overboard and took on something you couldn't handle on your own. Father like son, I suppose." She huffed and returned to her work. "So is okay for me to use it and completely heal myself?" Izuku called out. "No, that quirk puts you in a madman state." Recovery Girl snaps. "Madman?" Aizawa questions. "I can tell you this, and you can get the details from All Might and the others later. Izuku can permanently erase a quirk with Limit Breaker. The Noma thing that attacked everyone was literally ripped apart by Izuku." "Well, I'm glad I didn't see that," both Aizawas say. In a dimly lit bar. "Sensei, he completely erased the quirks," Shigaraki says, scratching his neck. He was pissed at Deku. He didn't know the vigilante had such power. He completely destroyed the Noma, the beast that was meant to be the end of All Might. "Calm down, Shigaraki. But do tell me more about this boy." All for one was intrigued. A quirk that permanently erases a quirk. It may not seem very useful to him, but it was a threat. "The boy's name is Midoriya. Well, now Aizawa Izuku," says Kurojairi, surprising Shigaraki. "Tamura." "How do you know?" asks Shigaraki as he grows suspicious. "I know many things. I run a bar after all," says Kurojairi. He now decides to keep his relation to Deku a secret. The boy had grown on him, and he didn't want anything to happen to him because of him. Izuku had once asked if he could come with him, but Kurojairi had said he was in too deep. He could return even if he wanted to. The bastard has 2 quirk, telekinesis and erasure, but what happened at us was different. The bastard had a 3rd quirk that makes him stronger. A quirk that breaks limits. All for one humus sounding amused. Kurojairi didn't like that. Even if he was on the other side of the screen and only a voice was being conveyed, the Mist Man could tell the man with many quirks was smiling. He remembered the first time Izuku had activated Limit Breaker. Kurojairi was taking care of Izuku in a deserted part of town, and when he activated, everything around him had begun to float, buildings and all. Only way to calm him down was to knock him out. But he was just as strong as All Might. Kurojairi learned that day that Izuku was something important to him as he hugged the boy that was too small for his age. He was a child he could never had when considering his line of work. All Izuku had wanted was a parent figure. That was all it needed to calm the boy down. For the sake of the boy, he decided to make contact with the father and warn Izuku about a plan that may be brewing in All for one mind. Izuku was out of bandages before Aizawa. The man groaned and complained to Recovery Girl as to why he got to be unmummified first. The class had a week of, and for that week Izuku spent time with his dad. Both of them had the most fun they have ever had in their lives, mostly doing crazy shit like jumping in a food cart and using telekinesis as a boost, or blackmailing President Mike into buying them stuff, and arguing which cat breed was cutest, and sleeping in a cat cafe surrounded by tens of cats. Aizawa teaching advanced sleeping techniques, finally able to pass on the secrets. The week off finally came to an end and both didn't want to go to school. "I don't want to go to school," groans Izuku. "You have to, you're a student," Aizawa retorts. "Then you have to go to school." Why? Aizawa asks. You're a teacher, you have to. Tosh. Aizawa humus, narrowing his eyes at Izuku. Izuku wears a collar, though it looks like a choker. Black it was, and it had a tracker. It couldn't be removed by the wearer, and so it was easy to track him if runs off somewhere. Aizawa, though, of his own son as a cat. He goes out one night, and is found sleeping soundly in his room the next morning. Izuku was an info broker after all. He didn't question it. In fact, it makes hero work easier for him. Now he doesn't have to go looking for these info brokers. Deku was one of the top 5 info brokers in Japan. It impressed Aizawa greatly. Izuku was forced to wait in the classroom like all the others. Everyone was saying they may be having a new teacher. He was slightly pissed. No more like really pissed. Say, Deku, who do you think is going to be teaching us? Kaminari asks with a cheerful smile. Izuku smirks at the boy as the doors open and Aizawa walks in. Izuku knew he already knew. Kaminari was a sore thumb sticking out and no one seemed to notice. These people were dumber than the act the boy was putting on, excluding his dad of Kusur. He likes his dad. He already grew accustomed to calling him by the title. He was happy to have a parent again. But the same couldn't be said for Kaminari. Izuku knew things. He was one of the top 5 info brokers in Japan. He knew straight away by just a glance that Kaminari was LOV's little spy. I thought you already knew, Kaminari-kun, Izuku says slyly as a shiver runs down the lightning boy's spine. A grin plastered on the teen's face. The blonde with the black streak narrows his eyes at the vigilante, and moves back a bit with a scowl. Nobody seemed to notice the atmosphere around the two, except to a certain spiky blonde and red and white-haired. Kaminari knew his cover was blown. What would happen now was now in Deku's hands. Underscore 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 underscore. Aizawa announces to the class that the sports festival will be coming up. Goodbye, Izuku says, opening the window. Sadly, the windows were people-proof. Izuku sighed and sat back on his chair. You're lucky that you have a choice to participate or not. What? The class shouted except a few, Kaminari included. Izuku is the vigilante Deku and is currently under the protection, custody of Yue and me. Aizawa cleared out, plus he's just going sneak out anyway. What, you're just going to let him do what he wants? Bakugo shouted. After what happened at the UST, he has gained enough point to be let out as long as he returns. What? As long he wears the tracker, that is, says Aizawa. That day at lunch the class was blocked by other students. Out of the way fucking extras, shouted Bakugo. Is this what all the class 1 is like, says a boy with steel-colored hair. From the looks in your tone, you're in class B, says Izuku appearing behind Bakugo. Who are you? Tetsu asked confused. He had seen the whole of Class 1A before. He had never seen this kid. I'm a new student. A lot of the students looked baffled. You can't just transfer into the hero course like that. So how did you get in? Asks a purple-haired boy. He reminded Izuku of his own dad. Let's just say my dad got me in because of some reasons, Izuku says slyly. So you're one of those rich bastard kids? The purple-tired-looking boy shot back. Izuku busted out laughing. Everyone looked at him as though he was a madman. He was laughing. The madam in his was laughing. Shut the fuck up, Deku, Bakugo said loud enough for all gathered to hear. Those that recognized the name stepped back. Deku, the Class B student, questioned. I'm in a rehab, or don't worry, I mean no harm, says Izuku with a smile. Now everyone recognized him as the vigilante. How? My dad's a hero in this school. How you guys find out who is up to you, so bye-bye, Izuku said and left the fear-struck students. They heard the rumors of Deku being in school and now they got their evidence. Izuku decided to go mess around with someone. It was going to be fun for him, but as annoying as hell for the other. By instinct he knew where his prey lied. Izuku opened the window. Happy it wasn't person-proof this time around, Izuku hopped of and out the 3-story high window, using his telekinesis to slow his descent and land right in front of Kaminari. Yo, Izuku shouts. Kaminari shrieks in surprise and steps back into a fighting stance. You trying to give people our heart attack? The blonde shouts at the green. Hey now, a vigilante should know when another is sneaking around, Izuku says slyly. Don't tell anyone about me, I'm warning you, Deku. What are you going to do? The crazed glint in Izuku's eyes shook Kaminari to the bones. After hearing about what Deku did to the Nomu, it had put him on a whole another level. Before coming to UA, Kaminari had heard about Deku's powerful telekinesis and Erasure together brewed pain. Having your quirk taken and then being thrown around like a rag doll was something he didn't want to through. He witnessed firsthand how Endeavor fended. He was out to collect some information. Deku had come across Endeavor around the same time. Endeavor spotted Deku and charged at him. It was so simple, just taking away the man's quirk. So simple to lift him up in the air and throw him around, smacking him back and forth from walls and roads. Deku stopped after noticing Endeavor was hanging by the fence, and left just like that, or so he thought. If Kaminari wasn't the one to call for an ambulance, he didn't know if his classmate would still be with the father, though he knew of the torture Todoroki went through. But still, losing a parent would be the most horrible feeling one could go through. He thought of Deku as a heartless monster before realizing that Endeavor was left in a state where he had a 100% chance of survival. All his previous thoughts were erased. Deku wasn't a murderer. He thought of him to be like him, but being on another level was no joke. Kaminari regretted trying to threaten the boy. "Let's be buddies," says Izuku. This surprised Kaminari. "I know about you," he says, confusing the blonde more. "Your family is in danger, so why not I help out?" Izuku says. Kaminari is left speechless. "Your mom and baby sister is within reach of All for One, and they use another name, and you had ran away from home 2 years ago to try and give them a better life by giving your mom a less mouth to feed to work for All for One because your father left a lasting impression on him, and him knowing you were his son decided to turn you into the same type of man he was. But you decided to be a vigilante instead of a villain, and you send money to your mom and sister, but All for One caught and threatened your family, making you his little lapdog. How? I'm an info broker, I know things. I can pull some strings, get your family out, and have Dad put them under protective custody." "Why are you doing this?" Kaminari asked. "I lost my mom and I'm just waiting for the best moment to bring down the bastard that killed her. I already got a whole lot of shit against the sick bastard, I just need evidence of murder," says Izuku with a smile, "and I want you to help with putting the fucker away." "Then you're going to help my family?" Kaminari asked. "Fuck no," Izuku replies. Kaminari cursed himself for getting his hopes up. Anger brew inside him. "'Cause I'm already on it," he says, pulling out his phone. The blonde is slack-jawed. "It's not something I'll be holding against you for your information. I just hate it when innocent people are being threatened. I do this for a living apart from beating the shit out of bastards. I'm the one that's asking for a favor," Izuku says, dialing a number, "so I'll be owing you one later." Before the Kaminari could say anything, the line picks up and a familiar voice speaks. "Yo, Kurojairi," Izuku says with a smile. "Kurojairi," Kaminari shouted. "So you do work for the villains?" "Kuro took care of me. Aside from that, I have no connection to those bozos," Izuku replied blankly. "Midoriya Izuku, thank God you're okay." Kurojairi let out a sigh. "It'd take a whole more than that to kill me," Izuku says with a smile. "Anyway, I want to get Kaminari out the league. Well, his family, that is." "I see you've met the boy. But it is quite surprising because you knew nothing of him." "Kuro, you underestimate me. I know a whole lot of things," Izuku says, shaking his head. "Listen, Izuku, All for One has taken an interest in you." The must starts before Izuku could speak of what he wanted. Izuku could hear the worry laced in his voice. "Kuro, why don't you meet up with Erasure Head instead? Speaking to me right now may not be the best idea," Izuku says, turning serious. Kaminari watched him, weary of what to do. "I will. I had actually already thought of doing so. I'll need a favor as well." "Yes, the family of Kaminari Denki. It would be best if you inform your father about this predicament. It'd be best if we cease this conversation. You'd never know who's tapping in on the signal." And with that, the call ended. Izuku gave a thumbs up to Kaminari. "Kurojairi should be able to get your family out. Now let's go tell Dad," Izuku says and grabs the shorter boy. Note: Izuku is as tall as Zero. They were in front of the principal's office. Kaminari's leg became jelly as he began shaking. "Is your quirk jelly or electrification?" Izuku said, laughing at the boy. "I'm not like you bastard," Kaminari shot back. Izuku ignored it and kicked open the door, revealing a mummified Aizawa and Principal Nizu, also another skinny-looking man. "What do you want, brat?" Aizawa glared. "Denki has a little secret he wants to share," he says, pushing the boy to the front. There was silence for a while. Then he began with apologizing. "I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice." "What is this about Kaminari?" Aizawa asked, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "I gave the location to League for them to attack. Everyone is dumbstruck. Why did you decide to confess?" Nizu asked. "My cover got blown and I wanted help from my family," he says, his head still down, ashamed of what he did. "Your cover was blown?" the skinny blonde asked. Izuku knew who he was, a grin plastered on his face. Deku is one of the top 5 hackers and brokers in the country. I should have known, said Nizu. I know a bunch of things I shouldn't know about. Dad says I make his job easier, the kid says gleefully. I know who you are, for example, he says, pointing to the tall skinny blonde. Only those with brains the size of peas wouldn't recognize you, plus your voices are exactly the same, Izuku states. The way you have with words is just like Aizawa-kun's, Toshinori states as his sweat dropped. Well, Kaminari-kun, you'll have to do some explaining, and Aizawa and his son will do something about your family, says Nizu. And it will be best to drop your mask and act as the real you from now on. Your friends deserve to know the truth as well. The blonde looked down. Cheer up, man. Look on the bright side, your friends are bound to forgive you and your family will be together again. Kaminari noticed something in Izuku. He had more than the green eat. He still had his family. He still had his friends that were willing to forgive him. What about Izuku? He has Kurogiri and he has his dad. But his mom is dead. He just started to learn how to make friends. His childhood friend doesn't believe in him, and his gung-ho on taking revenge on the man that took his mother away. He had pure hate for Dragon. The next day came, and then finally it was time for Kaminari to confess. Aizawa called him up to the class. Izuku had his head on the table. He was asleep. Kaminari has something he'd like to share with everyone. Aizawa told the class. Everyone was confused. Why would he call him up? What does their classmate have to share? Kaminari stood up, clenching his fist as he walked up. Buddy, what's going on? His friends' stomachs were filled with dread. Kirishima, everyone, I'm sorry. Everyone was confused. Why is their friend apologizing? Bakugo could feel that the person behind him was responsible for this. I was working for the League of Villains. The class was silenced. It's so quiet that if a pin was dropped an echo would be heard. I gave away the information on where the Ush was. I had been feeding information to them so they could take down All Might. Why? Ashido shouted as tears tricked down her cheeks. She was hurt. Kaminari was one of her best friends. I don't deserve anyone's forgiveness. Kaminari will be joining the rehabilitation project we have. Some of you probably have questions on what exactly this project is now, he emphasized, because back then when there was only Deku in the rehab project no one asked. If you wish to know, come along this weekend to see. It's true, they were now curious. Izuku finally woke and looked around. He saw Kaminari in front, so he must have confessed. He thought Bakugo struck and pulled him by the collar and threw him towards the podium in front. The boy hit it hard and fell down hard. You had something to do with the shit, didn't you? He shouted. Bakugo, do this again and you'll be receiving severe punishment. Aizawa snapped as he helped his son up. Deku is the one helping get my family out from the League's reach. He's the one, he blew my cover and the reason why I'm not in any prison right now. Please don't ruin my asshole image, Izuku begged. Aizawa just sighed at his son's antics. The class was curious about what kind of project the rehabilitation project was. They followed their class teacher's direction and found them in a small part of town. The place looked demolished. It was Bakugo's middle school that was half demolished. Their first thoughts was that it was probably from a battle between a villain and hero. That is usually the most common cause. The first thing they hear is a string of curses, in a number of different languages. Aoyama's face faltered when he heard French curses that were really horrible. They looked to Bakugo. The boy hadn't said anything. They followed the curses and found someone wearing a light blue overall, upper half tied around the waist, an orange vest with Yue on the back over a black shirt. The person was wearing a face mask like Shuji and a baseball cap. They could see the guy's hair was tucked in. The curses was coming from the guy. They wondered who it was, and then Achiko noticed something. Lita, it's Deku-kun, she said with a smile and walked up to the boy. Lita then noticed and followed. They looked to the boy's feet, the signature red shoes. Hey Izuku, Uraraka called. Izuku turned to see his only two friends walking up to him. He smiled beneath his mask and waved at them. On his other shoulder was a mountain of timber. Community service was a part of the rehab project. Why were you letting out a lot of curses? Uraraka asked. His two friends' sweat dropped at the memory of all the curses. Well, a day ago while we all were at school. Dragon. He laced the name with venom. His two friends shivered. Decided to toss a villain with a gigantic quirk down this way, and as you can see, the wall is in need of repair, and some of the classrooms were destroyed and some students were injured. The bastard left shortly after and didn't even pay for the damage. The villain was subdued, and like that the fuck was gone. Aldra High here is the only school middle school in this area, and just being here is making me sick cause all the memories are coming back. The fuck did you say, bastard? Bakugo shouted. This was after all his middle school. "Oh, don't go defending now, you prick," Izuku shot back. Bakugo launched at the boy with his hands exploding. Izuku erased his quirk and went in for a right hook. Aizawa arrived right on time to grab the hands of both boys and pull them and slamming them against each other. Their brains rocked in their skulls as they held their heads on the ground. "Sorry for the trouble," Aizawa said to the man beside him. Bakugo and Izuku recognized the man as the principal of the middle school. "Bakugo-kun, it's so nice to see you again. I'm really proud you made it into UA and the top class at that." Out of all the people that tormented Izuku in his life, the principal of his school was one of the only nice people he knew. When he got sent to the office for no good reason, instead of punishment, the busy man would take some of his time put to teach the boy. Izuku-kun would have made it as well. "I pray the boy is safe." The boy loved his mother very much. He wouldn't such a thing that was done. Deku's capture and identity have not been revealed to the public, so those that know about him didn't know he was already in custody. "Don't worry, Mr. Fujikata, the guy's safe and sound," Izuku says happily. The man bows with a smile and walks away to oversee the other places that need fixing. "At least there are those that always believed me," Izuku says, mocking Bakugo. The boy just scoffs and walks away. A couple of power lines had fallen, and so there was not much electricity. Kaminari was in charge of that. He became the power source, and the reconstruction of the school was almost over. With the two boys being allowed to use their quirks and all, the builders thanked them and their supervisor, who was Aizawa. It was midday now, and the group of 1A students followed the three to their next rehab project activity, which was volunteering at a kindergarten. Kaminari was having the worst time and Izuku seemed to be doing fine. There was a sudden villain and hero collision. Another part of the rehab project was having them help heroes. Aizawa told the class to stay back, especially Bakugo. It was pro-hero Kamui Woods against a villain with what looked like a villain made out of anything and almost everything. The pro was rounding up civilians that would most likely get hurt and keeping them far, far away. The villain found a little girl and fired at her. The pro's body moved on its own and used his body to shield the child. A metal pole was sticking out the hero's shoulder. It didn't look life or career threatening, but still the guy was going to bleed to death. Aizawa made his move. He got the young uprising pro and the little girl out. Izuku followed his lead and grabbed onto Kaminari. "Fry him," the boy shouted. Wait. Before Kaminari could protest, he was already being thrown with telekinesis. The villain grabbed Kaminari. "What the foo?" The lightning blonde let out 1,000,000 volts, frying his brain and the villain's. Izuku pulled back the blonde the moment he saw the villain rising. Erasure active, and the villain confused with why his quirk was gone met a foot, breaking nose and removing teeth. Kamui Woods got sent to the hospital. Aizawa tells the two boys good job, well done. The class, now satisfied with what the rehab project was, went their separate ways. With those activities done for the day, it was time to get Kaminari's family. Now that wasn't going to be easy. They had discussed things with Kurojiri. All for One keeps tabs on all his hostages and followers. If they suddenly go missing, that it would have been Kurojiri, with the fact that his has a quirk that practically make them disappear and appear elsewhere. And so they would have to break the boys' family out. The fact of Kaminari's betrayal is yet to be known by the League. If Nizu's plan goes well, then they all would come out without scratches. The ones doing the rescuing would be Deku anyway, to make it look like the boy was working on his own. Rika Rahikiri was a single mother. She had been struggling a bit as of late. Her son ran away 2 years ago, who had left a letter telling her that she should forget about him. How could she when she knew he was her anonymous supporter? Who else would send her money? Who else would want to help her? The young blonde woman with an electric quirk stood at counter smiling politely at the customers as she did her job as a cashier. Life was hard, doubling 2 jobs at the same time as raising her daughter. Her husband disappeared the day after he found out she was pregnant again, and she was only 30. She had her eldest when she was still a teen. Her husband had put up long enough, then gave up and left. Her son, who she named Denki, was smart enough to see she was struggling in raising 2 kids, and so he ran away. She prayed he was well. Last thing she wanted for her son to be, is to be like his father. Around the corner in an alley that had a clear view of the convenience store were 2 young teens. "Wow, you look just like your mom," Izuku said out loud. "Well, keep quiet," Kaminari shot back. "Anyway, so you know what to do?" he asked the boy whose hair looked black in the dark. "Wow, you look like your dad without the green." "I'll take that as a compliment," Izuku replied, not so sure on how to take that comment. Kaminari had explained his circumstances and his mother's and sister's circumstances. His sister should be about 3 years old, and at daycare at the moment. His mother, whose name is Rahakiri Rika, is doubling 4 jobs just to make ends meet. His bastard of a father left a lot of debt on her shoulders to take care of. He helped with the really bad ones and threatened the others, leaving them bloody and most likely crippled for life. He didn't do in all of them, otherwise she noticed. His mother was quite a sharp one. So the plan is to simply kidnap Rika-san and Miria-chan and take her to my place, Izuku told Kaminari. Is there another way to do this? The blonde asked as he pulled up his hood. Well, you mom and sister have the perfect story. All for one won't care if she and your sisters gets kidnapped by debt collectors, since it's none of his business. Dad has a car waiting somewhere along the road at where we'll strike. Have you kidnapped before? Kaminari asked. Couple of times. I'm an info broker and I have my methods, Izuku said, sounding as though it wasn't such a big deal. Kaminari just sighed. He's currently thinking that Izuku has a mental problem. It was mostly kidnap and hold for ransom then let go. I ain't heartless. And that's what I'm thankful for, Kaminari muttered. Rika started to move. The boys followed her in the shadows all the way to the daycare that her daughter was at. As she was walking home, she couldn't help but get nervous. Someone was following her. She picked her daughter and held her close. Could it be her debt collectors? Or could it be a villain? Her husband was a villain. She didn't know what happened to him, but she always knew that some people have been watching her. She once tried to ask a hero for help, and that was when her nightmares were answered. One night when it was really late, she woke to the cures of her daughter. She rushed to her room to find a knife stabbed into her daughter's crib right next her head. That scared her very soul out her body, and from that day on she had been living in constant fear. She hadn't been living in a very happy side of town either. For some reason, every time she wanted to move, something was stopping her. She couldn't get out. She had felt trapped. The woman panicked and ran down an alley. She turned, and that was when she faced her pursuers. Both were masked and wore black. She wanted to use her quirk to defend herself, but she couldn't. Her quirk was gone. She began to panic, and next thing she knows, there's darkness. She went limp and cursed herself. Kaminari caught his mother after Deku had knocked her out. How did you do that? Kaminari asked, slightly amazed. I learned pressure points, was all Izuku said. Mirai looked as though she was going to cry, but the boy hit her pressure point as well. Don't worry, they'll be fine, Izuku told Kaminari, who had begun to glare at him. I was thinking there would be someone watching her, Kaminari said, and then suddenly Izuku jumped on him, pushing him the ground, covering him and his mother and sister. A second later, a gunshot was heard. Shigaraki gave me to watch that slit and brat for some reason, and then all of a sudden I find Deku. The voice was familiar, and yet Izuku couldn't put a finger about where he heard it. He looked to see the one-eyed Jack from Us, the same guy who he had removed his eye once long ago. Guess they were shot on members. They can't put someone like Shigaraki to watch their pet's family. Oh well, it was bad luck for him, since Deku is stronger. He erased his quirk and just simply threw him around like a rag doll. His fun was spoiled, telling him it was enough. The man was still conscious when Izuku was about leave. Oh, by the way, Rika-san owes me, and I can't seem to find her husband. Tell your leader that I have his little pet family. If he wants them back, he has to give me Daiki Kaminari whereabouts if he knows, and if he wants them, I'm holding a ransom for Daiki, was Izuku said, and walked away while carrying the blonde woman and child with telekinesis. When they were far and in the car that Aizawa was driving, Kaminari finally started. That was nice line you came up with, he said with an actual genuine smile. He had been expecting more but was happy it didn't come. Now that wasn't a lie. Your old man really does owe me. How else do you think I know about you? Izuku said in a matter-of-fact tone. Kaminari face-palmed. Of course, why did he not wonder why Deku knew about him? They made it to the Aizawa household, and Kaminari was surprised to see it was a normal house. Yes, I have a normal home, Aizawa told him. He didn't have one at first. He bought this place after I was taken into his custody. It's a 3-bedroom house, Izuku clarified. So you can put your mom and sister in the spare room, Izuku said and led the way. He never had someone over at the place he lived before, especially someone like a classmate. Well, it was kinda funny right now because for the first he had someone over, and the reason was because they kidnapped a couple of people. Now to wait and see what Kaminari's mother's reaction would be. He needed to find a camera and record his fellow vigilante's reaction as well. Kaminari was waiting for his mother to wake up along with his sister. He looked over to the two Aizawas. The two weren't the average father and son. Izuku was help Aizawa out with paperwork from Yue and most likely other things. So Rika-san will be put under protection and be hidden away and have their names changed, Izuku said as he took a sip of his coffee. Hopefully no one will track them down. If they find out you are working with us, then they will undoubtedly target Yue again, said Aizawa as he rubs his temples. Kaminari too. I think they already know the kid has betrayed them in some way. Well, considering the fact we're in the same class and I'm an info broker and that I have a connection with his father, then yeah, I guess. Izuku mused. How and why do you know this villain anyway? The man clad in black asked the green eat. The bastard said he had evidence to Mom's death, but it was just a trap set for me. I escaped with my life. The bastard was hired to completely silence me, but I survived. Aizawa was quiet and Kaminari could feel the tension grow. The room suddenly went a bit cold as a draft blew in. I'm praying he has a connection to Dragon, Aizawa hissed. Then we can decapitate them both, Izuku said with a smile. Kaminari shivered. They do know they are talking about his dad here, though he could care less about the man who abandoned his mother. Wait, what? Kaminari thought, the sudden realization hitting him. He looked at the two in horror. Could it be possible that his father had something with the death of Deku's mother? His dad did disappear a year before the murder happened, and he was sure he lived in the same neighborhood as Deku, back then before he ran. He remembered his father falling into some really shady business and Deku's tale about being set up. Could it be? If so, he questioned why was he here? Why were they helping him? He couldn't think straight, and so he went and sat next to his mother and sister in the room they were put in. Rika woke in an unfamiliar place. She was not tied or bound by anything and her daughter was beside her. This was it for her and her daughter, she thought. Her one regret would be not being able to see her son again. On second thought, wait a sec. Her son was sitting on a chair, his head in the bed asleep. Denki, she called softly. Kaminari always had nightmares, and because of this the softest sounds made can wake the boy up instantly. When he heard his name being called, it sounded like a shout to him. The blonde bolted up and immediately took a stance. Denki. He heard the familiar voice and turned to see his mother. Mom, he struggled to say and looked away. He bowed his head in shame and apologized. I'm sorry for everything, Mom. It's my fault. Mirai and you were always in danger and I couldn't do anything. He apologized, his breath hitching as he did. He really missed his mom and his sister. He wondered why in the world he ran away in the first place. He was surprised when the woman pulled him in for a hug. The boy melted into it. He missed it very much. Tears trickled down the boy's eyes and he hugged her back and cried into her embrace. Izuku was going to deliver some snacks when the scene before him developed. He missed his mother too, and very much. He gave a soft smile and knocked on the door. He didn't want to disrupt it, but these people gotta eat. I brought you food. Sorry, did I interrupt? He lied. He damn well he did. No man, thanks a lot, Kaminari said, taking the tray. He had his goofy smile, a genuine one. Who's this? And now that I think about it, how did we get here? Where are the kidnappers? And where exactly are we? The woman questioned, panicking like Kaminari, parent-like child. Izuku thought. I'll fill you in, Mom. This Deku and we're at his place. Deku, they cried in shock and fear as she scooted away. She looked like a scared older version of Kaminari. Wow, this guy took after his mother by a lot. Don't worry, Mom. He's a good guy. The woman seemed to come down at that but was still on edge. Wait, what are you doing with him? Rika said, fearing for the worst. Kaminari looked away with shame. He is yet to tell his mother the whole story. Deku picked on this. Well, let's say your ex left you in quite a pickle, and he has business with me, and this guy was my classmate, Deku says, pointing in the blonde boy, and so I thought of helping him out so he doesn't go through what I did. Rika knew the fabricated story about Deku. My son would never. She was stopped midway by Kaminari. Mom, I think Dad was tied to it. Deku was framed, Kaminari said with his head down. Well, that explains that, Izuku said. Rika was shocked. She knew her husband was a villain, but why was this boy helping them? Why are you doing this? She asked. Izuku gave her a smile and told her the truth to why he is doing this. Well, it's the right thing to do. I see, Rika said, looking quite surprised. She and her family must be really lucky to be saved by a vigilante working with a pro hero. Erasure Head, as she knew him by, explained in detail about the circumstances. Her son was a vigilante, as was Deku. Both have been caught and are now under the custody of UA. But since an institution cannot take custody over such minors, Erasure Head took custody over the two. She was not enlightened of the fact that the man had parental custody over Deku. In order for there to be peace, there must be secrets. The public does not know yet of Deku's detainment. She was also told the two are part of a trial rehabilitation project at UA. Not many people knew about it, and it was also kept secret from the students. Deku's fiasco with the kid declaring war was shot down, saying it was a prank. That ended with all the other classes to start hating on the hero course students. Bakugo was told to never call Deku in public again. She was given a new name as well as her daughter. After Erasure Head drove them to their new home and left them with Kaminari, the boy needed to stay with his family to protect them further. Izuku thought they were heading straight home after, but instead they stopped at a flower shop. Aizawa didn't say anything as he got out the car and left the boy with a question mark over his head. The man came back with 2 bundles of flowers. He recognized them. They were his mother's favorite. Pick any flower cause I have no idea about flowers, which is quite sad since I'm a girl. Sheepishly scratching my head and laughing. What are you going to do with those? Izuku asked, his heart feeling like it was going to get stuck in his throat. You haven't been there never once, have you? Aizawa asked, more like stated. Izuku clenched his fist in guilt. They drove to the cemetery and got out the car. The green-eat shook. Even though he was going to her grave, he felt as though he couldn't face her. Aizawa slapped him on the back of his head, pushing him forward. Izuku walked up to where his beloved mother rested. Both men laid the flowers before the smiling picture of the one woman that had helped and protected them when they went through the darkest moments of their lives. Izuku fell to his knees and apologized. He blamed himself for everything. He believed everything was his fault. He promised he'd bring Hisashi to justice. He may not have been that directly killed his mother, but he knew deep down in his bones he was responsible. The boy cried his heart out as Aizawa stood over him. As they were making their way home, Aizawa placed a hand on Izuku's head. The boy's eyes grew wide with surprise as the man pulled him in. His warm mouth was similar to his mom's. Of course, god damn it, he's your dad. We'll take those bastards down together so she can rest easy, Aizawa told the boy. Izuku once more broke into tears as he melted into his father's fatherly embrace. It was time for the UA Sports Festival. A ton of people were excited about seeing the first years, especially Class 1A. There had also been rumors about Deku attending UA, but they all dismissed it. For all they know, the kid is still on the large. Outside the stadium, Pro Hero Death Armis and Kamui Woods conversed about the first-year students. Pro Hero Mount Lady, however, shamelessly showed of her body to get free takoyaki. Keep that up and Deku is going to come after you, Kamui commented. Oh please, I can handle that kid, the heroine said as she had her snack. Well, that kid took down Endeavor. What you probably most likely need to take him down would be a mutant quirk, speed or stealth quirk, Kamui stated. But I heard he got caught. It's just a rumor, Death Armis told her. But UA students have been saying that someone with same quirks as Deku is in Class 1C. The ears of a certain black-green-haired boy who was running late perked up. Doesn't she mean a? He was after all the Deku that they were talking about. This also caught the interest of the 2 pros. I highly doubt it. The Deku we saw doesn't look like the social type, said Kamui. Well, like you said, it's just rumors caused the person in Class 1C is a girl. Izuku noted the conversation and then ran off to get ready. He could have ditched and go do something else, but he was itching for some action. He hadn't pummeled anyone in a long time, and he really wanted to do it. Maybe he'd go against Todoroki and Bakugo, or maybe Shuji. He was a mutant type after all, and it would be fun to have a fight with him. He won't use his telekinesis though. He wondered if Dragon was around. He so wants to see his face twist with shock and confusion at the sight of him. He wants to tell the world his bring him down. Many people don't know Erasure Head's real name, and if they did know, they most likely forgot. And so Izuku would be just like all the others to the public eye, an aspiring hero. As he was making his way to the waiting rooms with his P uniform on, plus a mask that went up to bridge of his nose, he spotted a mother cheering up her son. Beneath his mask he smiled. Why he wore a mask? Well, obviously the public saw him as Izuku Midoriya, the Mother Slayer, treacherous son of Dragon. His face was all over the news too. No, now 3 years ago. Hopefully the name Izuku is a common name. The only thing he changed was his last name, to what it rightfully should be. He also wondered about what the pros were talking about, a girl with the same quirks as him. He thought about his mother. Inko was a secretive woman ever since her bastard husband came into the picture. Every day Izuku would watch her pray at her bedside for someone to be safe. Inko gave the boy hints that she was praying for his father to be safe, for him to grow up safe, and also for someone else. She would also look both happy and sad on his birthdays. She was happy for her son but then heartbroken at something else. He wondered about what it could be. Aizawa sat beside Yamada in the commentator's booth. Why on earth is he here? What kind of kami is playing tricks on him here? He's already used to him using his quirk all over the place, but to be next to him, while screaming into another amplifier. Oh god, is this punishment for something he has done? He wondered. He was thinking about a lot of things. He had gone over Inko's files once again. and tried to connect the dots. He knows in his bones that Dragon was responsible for her murder. The man always wanted fame and money, and he always wanted Inko as well. All those years he had her though was not enough because Izuku was in the picture, and Inko never loved him. She focused mainly on Izuku and not Hisashi. How Aizawa found out about Izuku went like this. Inko had written a letter to him telling him about Izuku and that he needed to get out and away from Dragon. The letter however reached him about a bit too late. Inko was murdered and Izuku was framed. Many had questioned the boy's motives. Dragon wrote it off as revenge against him for not being home. He even said the boy's sanity was dwindling. And yes, many confirmed that, those being his middle school classmates. He portrayed himself as a caring father, utterly hurt by the boy's actions. The act made the Aizawas gag when they saw it. Izuku has scars all over his body to prove the man spills nothing but lies. Even Aizawa has one. It was a time when he fought for Inko and Dragon furiously burned him on his back. That was the last time he ever saw Inko till her burial, and he wasn't even able to attend it because of Hisashi. He had to watch from the shadows. They finally announced for the students to make their way out. Many of the classes, mainly general studies, could be seen glaring at Class 1A. The so-called prank Izuku had played was not forgiven. The boy smiled beneath his mask. He really wanted to burst out laughing though. Midnight stood upon a stage, the male population blushing and popping their eyes out for what she was wearing. Izuku's face however was blank. Uraraka saw this and asked, "Izuku, do you swing the other way?" The question caught the boy off guard and No, he almost shouted. The girl was startled. To not frighten her he decided to tell her his type that he liked. Also he tried to not make it obvious that the type he likes is standing in front of him and looking at him cutely. Thank God for the mask, but there was still nervousness from his body gesture and voice. Petite, determined, and cute is my type, I guess. Those that are not afraid, and are willing to stand up for others, someone who can pretty much see through the walls I've built up. Someone like my mom, he said with a smile. Uraraka's permanent blush seemed to have gone darker. Those were the sweetest things the boy has ever said. Izuku thought of what he said and thought of Uraraka. Those were the qualities he was looking for in a girl, and she had all of it. Of course, his putting those aside, he needs to bring down Dragon. For this year we will have 2 representatives, one from Class 1A, to represent the hero and support courses. There were groans of disappointment and disapproval from all around. Bakuga Katsuki, Midnight called out, and Izuku decided to join the groaning crowd. And another from the Class 1C to represent the General Studies and Business Studies courses. The students went quiet and anticipated who it would be. Bakuga on stage could care less, as well as everyone else. Izuku however had a gut feeling that he would see something that would most likely shock him for the rest of his life. Izumi Mikumo. Aizawa from the commentator's booth stood up and looked down to the stage in shock. Yamada beside him surprised by his sudden reaction to the name. Izuku's eyes went wide and his jaw hung. Uraraka was about to ask what was wrong when she finally saw TH girl who went by the name walked up. Class 1A eyes went wide with shock. Bakuga, who was standing on the stage, looked visibly stunned. Mikumo was Inko's maiden name. That was what shocked Aizawa and Izuku. But now they are about to be shot with another bullet called shock. The girl faced the crowds. And there stood a girl that has shocked Class 1A, a girl whose face and hair color was identical to Izuku. Izumi Mikumo stood there looking like the female version of Izuku Aizawa. Izuku thought his eyes would fall out, even Aizawa. "Aizawa, you okay, buddy?" Yamada asked, looking quite worried. The man sat back down and quickly looked through the files. He found the girl's file quickly and read through it. The girl's name was changed. The name she first used was Tetsuya, Izumi Tetsuya, but it was changed for some reason. The girl looked exactly like his son, apart from the fact she was female, but the resemblance is still very shocking. He looked at the girl's quirks. He went quiet. Yamada looked over to him quite worried. What was about the girl that made him act like this? He was the homeroom teacher of Class C. Izumi was quiet type and always kept her head down. He noted long ago to tell Aizawa that there was a female Izuku in his class. But it had slipped his mind. He was probably cursing his absent-mindedness right now because he had failed to inform Aizawa that the girl's quirks were exactly like Izuku's. The said boy was about to have a panic attack. Izumi stood on stage proudly. She had been holding back and hiding herself for a long time. She was an orphan and smart one. The orphanage she grew up in was poor, but everyone treated each other like family. She was happy, but still wanted to know the reason why she was put there. 2 years ago she was adopted by Dragon or Hisashi Midoriya. To her he was a kind man and a caring father, She wondered how this man could have an ungrateful son known as Izuku Midoriya. What was more shocking was that she learned that he wasn't even the man's biological son. Yet how Hisashi portrayed himself as the most caring father made the girl believe all his words. And what was even more shocking was that she learned that the woman the boy supposedly killed was her own mother, biological mother. That meant Deku was her brother. She looked up records and found out she was the eldest child by an interval of 10 minutes. Fire burned in her belly. She would avenge the woman. Even though the woman was the one who put her up for adoption, she had yet to find that reason. She took the woman's last name, only to surprise Deku. She had asked Hisashi about her real father, but the man said he didn't know. If the girl had looked hard enough, and thought more carefully, she would have witnessed the disgusting sinister smile that grew on his lips every time she turned her back. She entered the general studies and decided to transfer to the hero course once she showed what she was made in the sport festival. Why? She believed the exam was flawed. How can one measure true strength and application of quirk if they go against robots? She looked at the boy that stood beside her. He had a shocked expression on her face. She read things up on Deku. She knew the boy's name was Bakuga Katsuki, a childhood friend of Deku. She talked to him later. She knew she would ask why she looked like Deku. There was something strange about Class 1A though. They had shocked expressions. The greeny boy with the mask looked the most surprised, as though he had seen a ghost. She didn't know the reasons for those expressions and didn't really care that much at the moment. She had one goal, and that was to win this. She began her speech before Bakugo. As the representative of the following classes mentioned, I'm here to say that on behalf of everyone, we are here to prove ourselves. The entrance exams are flawed and they do not allow those non-physical quirks to pass. We are here to prove everyone wrong. We can become heroes with our special quirks, and we are giving it our all, so don't look down on us. Hero course, we will sweep you off your feet. And with that, the crowd of students cheered viciously. The Gen Ed were hyped and throwing their fist into the air. Izuku didn't know what to think. He was running possible answers through his head. He looked around the stadium. He spotted some people that made his stomach boil. He told Shoji Mizo in his class, "If I start charging after Dragon, knock me out." He can't really tell what he would do if went up against him. Worst case scenario, he dies. Or the other. The better case would be he's arrested. Then he can weed himself out with the help of Neo Mesa, since he's a freaking walking lie detector. But he can't rely that much on him, because even if he can vouch, he would need proof. Who is this girl? He wondered. Uraraka was about to ask why she looked like him, but the look in Izuku's eyes stopped her. He too did not know. Bakugo tished at the girl. It just made his insides boil even more. There was now freaking two of them. The boy began to his speech. "Don't get your hopes up, cuz I'm going to be number one." There was silence. All of Class 1A just face-palmed. The crowd that started shouting and cursing and jeering. The whole lot was enraged. Is it me, or did his ego grow bigger after I was gone? He asked to no one in particular, but someone decided to answer. No, I'm guessing it did, Kaminari told him. Most of the class was still quite hostile. Mineta was still very much afraid. Izuku is hoping the kid gets kicked out of the hero course, or hopefully the whole of UA. He's using all his willpower not to pummel the boy. The girls apart from Jairu and Ajiri began to warm up and not be afraid or have anything against him. Yaoyorozu was still hesitant about him. Ashido, well, the girl always sides with her friends, that being Bakugo Bakutsuki. The guys in his class, well, Kaminari began hanging out with him, since they both are pretty much in the same boat. Lita and Uraraka, may God bless them, he thought. As they were the pure souls, they were the first people to befriend him. The others are not that hostile. Kota Kog was less like Mineta. Tokoyami didn't seem to mind, as did Shuji. Aoyama just seems like he doesn't care, and so forth. The greatest mystery though would be Todoroki. He wasn't hostile, and that what worried him. Why? He beat his old man and he doesn't seem to care. Well, he understands all the hellish training that is nothing short of torture, but still the lack any retaliation was unnerving. He kept his eye on the girl as Midnight explained the game. An obstacle course shouldn't be that hard. As the game started, Todoroki was the first to act, freezing everything. The hero courses managed to break through. Izuku was dumbstruck when Izumi used the same quirk as him. Izuku used Todoroki's ice to his advantage and ice skated across. Others saw his lead and followed, and then they reached their first trial. The robots. Todoroki instantly froze the massive 0-point robot. He didn't warn the others on time, as he left them behind and were about to be crushed. Izumi saw this and on instincts, just like Izuku, both raised their hands simultaneously instead of seeing floating frozen chunks of metal. A shock wave occurred. It was as two powerful invisible forces collided, creating a shockwave that blew everything away. The remains of the frozen robot was gone, leaving dumbstruck students, teachers, and audiences. There was silence as everyone had stopped in their tracks. The silence finally then broken by the two commentators. "Aizawa, Yamada, what are you teaching these kids?" both shout at each other. This brought everyone back as they all got over the shock and would ask about it later. The commentators, however, were having a scuffle in the booth, yelling at each other because either one of their students had caused that shockwave. That being Izumi Mikumo of Class 1C, whose homeroom teacher was President Mike, and Izuku Aizawa, whose homeroom teacher was Erasure Head. The first match ended with a tie. Izumi and Izuku were tied. The girl was disappointed in herself. She had used her quirk to get this far, and the mask-wearing kid just went up and exploded himself with a piece of the robots from before, overtook her along with two leading 1A boys and running off. If she hadn't used her quirk and collided with the kid, she would have been placed. She felt worse knowing that the kid was Deku. She figured it out when both of them caused the shockwave. Twins with exact same quirks were rare and were bound to have more, but would still be exactly the same. Pitted against each other can cause what just happened. The rumor about Deku and rehabilitation project was now all truths. She wondered why the boy shared the last name of the underground hero, though. This could be her chance. She'll unmask the vigilante for the whole of UA and public eye to see. She was about to confront him when suddenly he confronted her. "If you are thinking that you can expose me, then sorry, shorty. But I'm in rehab and my detainment is supposed to be classified. There are dire consequences involved," Izuku clarified, glaring at the girl. Izumi got pissed. "No one calls her shorty. I'm freaking older by 10 minutes. I'll gladly tell the world, Mother Slayer." Now the boy was pissed. Both Izumi and Izuku activated Erasure and grabbed each other's collars. Lita was about to rush over with his quirk, but nothing came from his booster. In fact, the whole of the stadium lost their quirks. Everyone's jaw dropped and they zoomed in on the commotion. Both black-green-haired teens had Erasure active. From the crowd's dragon grinned sickly. "As long as he has the girl twisted around his finger, then the two won't act. Their one remaining family member." All Might was dumbstruck. He couldn't call upon one for all. It was as though Erasure had erased it. But now, it was the two students in the arena that were at each other's throats. A Class C student ran forward, as did Lita, to break them apart. But the moment they reached their respective classmates, the two dropped. Lita went to Izuku and Shinso went to Izumi. The students were given time to rest up before the next match. It was every man for themselves game. This gave ample time for the two teens to rest and for everyone else to figure out what happened. Of course, they were in separate rooms. Aizawa was walking to go and check up on both students, and that was when he walked into the motherfucker of all bastard. Hisashi Midoriya. Dragon. The man gritted his teeth and clenched his fist and willed every single cell in his body to not strike. "Yo Shota, long time no see, how's your back?" Hisashi mocked. A ghost pain flashed over the scar on Aizawa's back, from both his shoulders to the middle of his back. It was a large, ugly scar that was thankfully hidden by the man's clothes. Bakugo stood frozen on his spot. He was just wondering, waiting for the field to be set, when he overheard. "What are you doing here?" the man growled menacingly. "Why, I'm here to see my adopted daughter perform," Hisashi smirked. "It's too bad you didn't know about her. The slut thought she could hide her bastards. Congratulations on finding your pathetic excuse for a son, though." "What are you planning, bastard?" Aizawa growled. "Oh, nothing much, but you listen here, keep your slut son's mouth shut. Otherwise something will happen to his sister and your daughter. She believes every single word I say." The man had a sick grin plastered on his face. "She could end up with something worse than you and your son has, that everyone will see." The man chuckled and walked away, but stopped to add more fuel to the fire. "Or she could end up like that slit," and with that the man walked away. Bakugo felt as though he wanted to blow up. One of the heroes he looked up to was a fucking fake, and the things he said about his aunt, his second mother. He was mad, at himself, at the bastard, but really and mostly at himself. He had been blaming the victim all this time. He was sick of himself, truly sick. He felt like clawing at his insides. He was guilty. He felt like throwing up. A loud crack and bone snapping echoed through the hallway, snapping him out of his trance. He looked down the hallway to where his teacher stood. The wall that only someone with a strength enhancer quirk could crack or break had a large dent, and in the center was Aizawa's fist. Blood leaked from his knuckles and pooled on the floor. Bakugo was struck with fear, fused to where he stood. The anger that radiated of the man felt like killing intent he has never felt. He had his heart and throat as though he was suffocating. He knew he can't walk out to the man. After all, he too was one of the causes of his child's suffering. Aizawa would most likely lash out at him in this state. He needed someone to get here and fast. To the boy's luck, someone did. All Might was walking through hallways in search of Aizawa. He didn't expect to see young Bakuga plastered to the wall with an utmost terrified look on his face. Fear was in his eyes. The closer he got to the boy, the more aware of the killing intent he felt. It shook the number one pro to his bones. This was something he had never felt before. He feared it was a villain, and whatever that was down the hallway was something far dangerous than he had ever faced before. This urge to kill was something even the number one villain couldn't muster up. He went into his hero form. His smile fading, suspecting for the worst as he charged at the source, only to find a man in black erase his quirk and hold him by his throat, almost crushing it. Bakuga snapped out of his fear-struck trance and slid down to the floor to witness what just happened. There was swoosh and something shot by him. He turned his head to see, and his eyes grew in horror as he saw Aizawa holding a tall, skinny man by the throat. "Yagi?" Aizawa questioned and dropped the man. All Might coughed and took deep breaths of air. He looked up to the man that a second ago felt like killing a million people to see a confused expression. "What's wrong, Aizawa-kun?" he asked, coughing. "It's nothing," Aizawa growled and walked away with a bleeding arm that did not go unnoticed. "What's going on with you, Aizawa-kun?" All Might asked once more, standing up once more. "I'm a father, Yagi. Something you won't understand," the man growled and walked away. "Both of them passed out from quirk overuse," says Recovery Girl as she patches up Aizawa. She could have reprimanded him for breaking his arm, but she let it slide. "Why not tell the girl the truth?" the old nurse suggested. "The bastard has his fangs dug deep in her. If we tell her, she'll most likely want that man to tell it to her. From there the bastard is just going to sink his fangs deeper. He'll spout more lies, and when she finds out, there's no telling what that bastard will do to her." The man sighs heavily. "If we reveal Dragon, the chances him doing something worse to her are high, and not to mention we still have no proof he is behind Inko's murder, even though I can feel in my bones he's responsible," the man growled, his bloodlust leaking out till he got a bonk on his head. "Stop that, you scared one of the kids and also almost choked All Might to death," Recovery Girl huffs. "Sorry, could you explain the brats?" "Izuku and Izumi are undoubtedly twins. They also have the same quirks. This is a rare phenomenon. Their quirks can be said to be halved. Izuku is one half and Izumi another half. When they come together, their quirks become stronger, and what happened to the robot will happen when they use their quirks together," she explains. From Aizawa was getting was. "So if these brats are near each other or piss each other off, then all hell breaks loose. Their quirks become stronger along with the drawbacks resulting in what just happened. They should wake up soon," she says, "so you should also start heading out." Keeping her in the dark was probably the best thing to do in his mind. From how she and Izuku interacted, it just meant that she doesn't know the whole truth. She probably knows that she's related to Izuku, he believes. Izuku, however, probably doesn't know. He didn't know she even existed. Inko most likely put her in the orphanage so that she could stay out of Dragon's reach. But sadly the man found her, took her in. Sharad is the father of the year, tells self-pitying stories, blame a freaking 12 of murder. He wondered if that girl even had a brain. But now he has more on his hands. He has one more to save, one more of Inko's legacy to protect. The man leaves and goes to check on Deku, and he was gone. The kid was already outside ready to start the next game. He ran into Bakuga on the way. For some reason he didn't glare at him usual. That was completely weird. He spotted Izumi and didn't want to be anywhere near her. Well, she too had the sentiment, and was probably for the best. "When did you break your hand?" Mike shouted. "Dad broke his hand." Izuku wondered. Wait, Dragon is here. Must have gotten pissed. The whole arena was turned into a maze. Okay, how they turned that into that in under what seemed less than 30 minutes is amazing if has anything to say about it. As much he wants to avoid Izumi, he wants to know why she has his mother's name, why she looks like him, and what bone does she has to pick with him. After using his quirk on the robot, and seeing that explosion, he'd been feeling her glare on his back ever since they passed the finish line. It only took one glance at her, looking up to Dragon, and seeing Dragon smile back at her and seeing her face brighten up like the sun to tell him he and she are working together. It seemed as he missed out some information. It seemed he had more things to uncover. Why does she have Mom's last name? Why did she look like that when Dragon smiled at her? Is that bastard feeding her with lies like everyone else? Izuku thinks his head is going to explode. He can see the reason why they look alike so clearly, but he doesn't want to admit it since now she has a connection to Dragon. He felt like pulling all the hair on his head out. Izumi on the other hand felt great about standing up to Deku. She thought through her plan on how to expose him and decided against the idea. She wanted to hear the boy's reason. She wanted to hear the story from different angles. Of course Dragon didn't know about this. She knew it was going against the man's wishes, but something in her told her that she needed to uncover everything. She looked up to where her adoptive father stood. The man stood, smiling down at her, wearing a rough smile on his face. His assistant stood beside him. The man's hair was cinder black, strange visors over his eyes like that of a robot. Man wore a jet black suit, and Izumi never once saw the man far from Hisashi without an order. She would wonder who he was most of the time. She could feel a heated glare scorching her back. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. She wondered what would make the kids turn out to become what he had. Kaminari was having quite a lot of fun today. It was making him forget that he betrayed his friends. But he knew they were still wary. They talked the same or laughed the same at times. It was an unpleasant, awkward feeling. But he was still enjoying it today. Also interesting, there was suddenly a female Deku. He looked over to the other vigilante and noted he had been really shaken up. Even with everything, he had a nagging feeling in his gut, like someone he had been searching for was around, and that person was someone with the ability to make his insides boil. But he decided to concentrate on the next match. Here we have what can be said as another obstacle course. However, this time you students are each other's obstacle course, shouted Mike as he explained. You all are given points based on the place you have came at, but since the two of you have taken first place as a tie, the points have been halved, Midnight proclaimed. And out came the headband, Izuku and Izumi flashing 5,000 each. The aim was to collect as much points as possible. The top 16 will move to the final rounds. This was going to a walk in the park for Izuku. Izumi was feeling a bit nervous. She didn't want to hurt her fellow schoolmates. Shinso Hitoshi was grinning madly. Todoroki didn't bother him. It was child's play. Bakugo, however, was not concentrating. His inner turmoil was distracting him. Most of all, he felt guilty and disgusted with himself, his resolve wavering as he looked back on what he did. The game has begun and everyone was out for blood. Ha ha ha. Not really, most of the points was going to the hero courses. Some people even formed teams to through the round. Izumi, the female Izuku, had formed a team with her trusted classmate Shinso. Kaminari and Izuku seemed to be working together, along with Uraraka and Lita Yayorozu was working with Todoroki and Bakugo, and the Bakuskud minus Kaminari. Of course, present Mike was having a blast, shouting out every time he saw something worth shouting about. Aizawa was trying to distract himself from everything. Deku, Kaminari called out to Izuku as they were running through the maze. Is that girl probably your sister? He asked. Most likely, Izuku replied. These guys honestly didn't really care about the sports festival. They were looking for a way to get the blood pumping. That was really a shocker, huh? Kaminari told him. Honestly, he didn't know how to handle the situation. Kaminari had been having a queasy feeling, and so he decided to tell Deku. Aizawa, I think something is wrong, he tells the boy. The two stop in their tracks. They are far from any cameras and in what looked like some sort of tunnel, and so no one in the audiences could see them. What is it? Izuku asked, sounding serious. I don't know, but don't you, the timing is little off, Kaminari says. We got out my family from All for One's reach and nothing much happened, and all of a sudden you have a sister here, and not only that but Dragon is also here. Izuku gritted his teeth. Kaminari was right, and he knew Dragon knew he was in UA. Not only that, but I think he's here, Kaminari says. Izuku didn't ask who. What do you the possibility that my dad is working for Dragon are? He asked. They are high. Your dad disappeared 3 years ago. Mom was murdered a year after. Kurojiri even said that the man was let go by All for One. So he found a new employer. Not only that, but to lure you in and try to kill you. There's no doubt Dad is working with Dragon. The horn signaling the game was over was blown and the maze began to disappear into the arena. We find him and Dragon is done for, Izuku says. At one end of the tunnel Izumi was listening in and on the other was Bakugo. Apparently Todoroki was with him. The students moving forward to the final rounds were announced and shown on the big screen. I'm too lazy to name them, so Izumi replaces Oyama. Right of the bat, Izuku would face Todoroki, but right after the match with the male Class C student that made it to the finals. Now it was time for the recreational games where all could join in. Izuku didn't want any part of it and decided to sit it out. He decided after the battle with Todoroki he'd just ditch the whole thing and go cause some trouble to show that Deku was still at large. What he didn't plan on was talking with Todoroki. There he was, him and Todoroki face to face in an isolated hallway. So what do you want to talk about? Izuku asked. Did he finally come to rant at him, or whatever he wanted, compared to the whole class? Todoroki was a mystery to him. I just wanted to thanks, was Todoroki's words. That stunned the vigilante and froze him on the spot. Those few words was all it took to blow Izuku's mind. TTT thank me. The utterly shocked boy pointed at himself. Todoroki simply nodded. Sure, I guess with that hell you've been through you thank me, but like this in a really calm manner, it almost seems like you're grateful, which I find odd even if I did beat your father to an inch of his life. Izuku began to ramble until he was stopped by Todoroki. What my dad did to me is nothing compared to what Dragon did to you, Todoroki began. You managed to talk some sense into my dad and that's what I'm grateful for. Ever since the day he was released from the hospital, all the trainings and everything else, they were done and gone. It doesn't make up for all that he's done so far, but ever since then everything was somewhat surreal. Izuku didn't know what to make of this, but deep inside he felt somewhat glad, unconsciously letting out a satisfied smile along the way. I guess I'm glad to hear that. My dad told me that I'm free and I can do whatever wanted. For so long he had been trying to turn me into the #1 hero, but now that I'm free to do whatever I want, I honestly didn't know what to do until you showed up. Izuku didn't know where this conversation was heading now. For some reason it made him nervous. What I want to do is help you. Once again Izuku was stunned and frozen in place. Both our mothers suffered from quirk marriages and that's something I can relate to you on. I guess all I wanted to say was if you need help, the Todoroki family is willing to lend you a hand. With that the dual-colored haired boy walked off. Izuku was left where he was standing. He didn't know how to feel. For the first time in a long time someone was reaching out to him to help him. It wasn't due to obligation or pity. He could feel the respect that Todoroki had for him. When he spoke, someone genuinely wanted to help him. His heart ached with joy. His knees felt numb and gave way. As he slid down the wall he clenched his chest and sobbed slowly to himself. This feeling of relief that washed over him felt so good he didn't know what to do but cry. He felt so happy that someone was willing to help him because they on their own wanted to. Bakugo heard everything and the feeling of guilt only seemed to double and grow even more. The recreational games was going on, and Aizawa went to get a drink. He was pissed off already after seeing Dragon. He got even more pissed when he walked into Endeavor. Excuse me, Aizawa quickly said as he tried to push past the man, but the hulking man blocked his path. Wait, Erasure Head. The time of the #2 hero almost sounded as though he was begging. Aizawa stopped in his tracks and turned to the man. The boy, Midoriya Izuku, Deku. Aizawa felt sick whenever he heard Midoriya. Worse when they put it together with his son's first name. I heard you were on his case. What of it? Aizawa almost growled. Once again Endeavor doesn't know Deli is already in custody. I want to help, was the #2's reply. Bring him down? Aizawa asked. Endeavor simply shook his head. I want to help clear his name. Aizawa literally stood frozen where he stood. Aizawa swore he could have fainted right there and then. His long line of hero work couldn't have prepared him for what the flaming #2 hero proposed. I'm sorry, but I don't think I heard that right. Aizawa made a motion of checking his ears. If he wasn't dreaming then he needed to get his ears checked. I said I wanted to help you clear the boy's name, Endeavor begrudgingly replied. Why would want to help? Aizawa asked. He wasn't going to fall if this was the trap. Our battle from a year ago wasn't as one-sided as it seemed. Did you really think I'd fall victim to a child so easily? Yeah, Aizawa guessed that a pretty long time ago. I saw the scars on that boy's body. Not only that, but he had the same eyes as my son when he first saw me. Honestly, I was at loss and ended up letting the boy do me in, but he never did. Aizawa held his breath as he listened to the flame hero's tale. I may have hit the boy pretty hard in the head because he was staggering when he began to talk to me. Flashback. Endeavor was off duty and making his way back home. But even though he was off duty, it didn't mean he wasn't ready for anything. He always wore his suit under his civilian clothes just in case anything happened, and that was when he spotted the young vigilante. The so-called mother killer Izuku Midoriya. He charged at the boy. Taking note, he was a mere child to him. He didn't throw his punch too hard, but still it was strong enough to slam the boy into the wall, hitting his head. He was used to taking down larger villains and whatnot, all in all to become the #1, but he was stuck in #2, which greatly tucked him off. But he was still a hero at heart. Not the most heroic, but still a hero. He tuned down his flames and tried to capture the boy. His flames burned through the boy's clothes, and what he saw shocked and stunned him. Where he stood, the boy was covered with horrid scars, whip marks and burns. That moment of hesitation gave Izuku the chance to throw him about. Todoroki thought this was the end of him. But his demise never came. Why won't you end me? He asked. I'd be a villain if I killed you, Izuku told him. I know a lot of things about you, Endeavor. Izuku told him. I could easily come clean about how you treat your family, but compared to how I was treated, your kids are living a dream. Midoriya Hisashi isn't what he seems, Miss Endeavor. Even you are in danger with him around, Izuku told him. Honestly, family is the most important thing in the world, Mr. Endeavor. Izuku smiled a sad smile with tears in his eyes. Enji Todoroki could somehow relate. One of his sons are gone, and now with the chances of him dying he might never see them again. You should treat your family well and keep them safe. Otherwise they will end up like me. Izuku gave a gawky grin. Endeavor knew that the last moments of his life was in this boy's hands, so instead of being angry he decides to reminisce about his family. He regretted everything and how he treated them. It wasn't long when he passed out. When he woke he was in a hospital room with 4 drops hooked up to him. Luckily for you, someone who knew first aid was around and treated you. Honestly speaking, if you weren't treated you would have been half dead when you arrived, but the person made sure you would survive, the doctors had told Endeavor. The kid that called the ambulance said that you were already treated. Where is that boy now? The hero asked. Who knows, he ran off right after. Apparently Endeavor was saved by 2 people, the one that called the ambulance, and the one that treated him. From what Deku was telling him, he knew in his gut that it was Deku that treated him, then leaving so the other kid that was watching the whole thing from the shadows to call an ambulance flashback end. I owe the boy for saving my life, Endeavor told Aizawa. Oh my god, Izuku, what kind of shit do you get into? Aizawa thought. Fine, but even so, I still don't trust you, he told Endeavor sternly. Fair enough. And with that flaming hero walked away. All throughout the recreational games, apart from talking with Todoroki, Izuku felt out of it. He hadn't cried for some time, and crying was a good stress reliever. He felt tired. Honestly, he felt like ditching the whole thing, and that's what he was gonna do. He was up against Shinso Hitoshi from the general course. Izuku found his quirk interesting. Heck, it was a great quirk to become a hero with. He never went through with the entrance exams, but from what Lita and Uraraka told him, they had to fight robots. The quirk is not good against that. The exam only measures strength. They should take in more people with technical quirks. So when the match began he raised his hand. What is it, Midnight? Who was the proctor asked. I forfeit, Izuku called out. By a miracle the whole stadium was silenced. Just then. What? Mike shouted along with the crowd. Why, he shouted out. Don't feel like it. I just want a sleeping bag and a cat right now, Izuku told them. Eraser, he's just like you in more ways than one, Mike says, and Aizawa simply grunts in reply. As Izuku was leaving, Shinso grabbed his shoulder. They were away from watchful eyes, and it was only them. Are you pitying me? The purple-haired boy shouted. No, not really. The entrance exam was flawed. Someone like you should have gotten in, Izuku told the boy. You're participating so you can get into the hero course, Izuku asked, and the boy nodded in confirmation. Then you should be grateful, Izuku told him. It's hard to feel like that when someone is underestimating me, Shinso shot back. Oh no, Izuku said, waving his hands in the air. I can somewhat relate to you, Izuku told him. Like you, I also have a quirk that isn't anything physical. Say that to the robot you and Mikumo blew up, said Shinso. That's something completely different. What I'm trying to say is there should be more heroes like you and Erasure Head. I'm not underestimating you or anything. Honestly, I thought about ditching this whole thing at the very start. I don't feel that should be continuing anyway, Izuku stated and began walking away. And why is that? Shinso shouted out. A broken person like me can't be a good hero, Izuku replied as he disappeared down the hallway. He texted his dad and said he was on his way to Hosu. He had some business down there that he wanted to take care of. Aizawa called and told him to meet him back home. Dragon was still around, and it was for the best that Izuku got out of there. The trip to Hosu was super short. How, you ask? Kurojairi. The Miss Man had contacted Erasure Head, and now he was working as a double agent. That was really risky. Erasure Head, people like Mamajiri here. Izuku's business was visiting an old said to be retired hero. Buy him taiyaki and sneak into his home like a kakaraka and place it there. It was just an in and out. Apparently he had promised to buy Sorahiko Torino, better known as Gran Torino, some taiyaki and bring it to him, but that was around the time before he was mummified, so he never kept his promise. How they met. During one of his nightly patrol as a vigilante, he got his ass handed to him by the old man, but the old man didn't turn in his or capture him. If he did anything, he trained the boy. The training was pretty, let's say hell. Gran Torino knew by looking at the boy that he didn't have a single evil bone in his body. Plus he never liked or believed Dragon. Izuku placed the taiyaki in the fridge and was just about to crawl out and escape. Sadly, there's no such thing as escape when you enter this man's house. Izuku got stomped onto the floor by the jet-powered old man from behind. All this time we haven't been in contact, and you decided to sneak and leave me Taiyaki, said Grandma Torino. I'm very sorry, master. Izuku mumbled and stuttered into the floor. He held his back in pain and tried to put up a tough front. Well, at least you still think about me, unlike some people. In the staff zone where all the teachers sat, All Might sneezed out loud. The gaunt man shook his head, feeling a bit lightheaded. Catching a cold? Asked Ectoplasm. No, don't think so, he replied to his college. Of course I think about you, with getting so. Watch it, brat, Gran Torino ordered. Izuku quickly shut his mouth and covered it with his hands. He didn't want to get a beating just because he commented on the old man's age. Is that all you wanted to do? Gran Torino asked. Yeah, sorry I didn't get to keep my promise cause I was mummified and a lot of things happened and sorta forgot. Izuku felt guilty as he was confessing. He was seated on the floor with bricks over his lap as punishment as the little old man was eating taiyaki. Well, I'll let you have the hook for now, but remember to bring me taiyaki regularly. I'm not helping you for free, says the old man as finally Izuku is set free. Technically the old man is helping him for free. Only buying taiyaki for the old man wasn't that hard. Heck, he even made some at times. Aizawa had jaw dropped at his baking skills. Gran Torino was helping him find evidence, but just like Izuku, he can't find anything on murder. It was nerve-wracking for all involved. Izuku decided to take a walk around the city, and that's when he noticed Pro Hero Ingenium running after someone. He didn't have any of his gear. Aizawa had finally confiscated all his weapons. To replace what he took away, he gave the kids brass knuckles. Yeah, for someone like Izuku, is that even a good idea? Izuku followed after Ingenium. He lost the guy for a second, and when he finally spun the guy, his eyes went wide in horror. Thrusting his hand forward, with all his might he blasted away everything in his path. He blasted Stain of Ingenium. Ingenium, Izuku sputted in horror, using his power to pull the hero towards to him. The man was not moving. He looked paralyzed, but he was alive. For now though, the man has been stabbed in the legs and the back. Izuku doesn't know if he could work as a hero. Ingenium was one of his favorite heroes that he looked up to. You'll pay for this, Izuku shouted as he charged after the hero killer Eraser. Flaring, he tried to grab the villain, but the man was quick and nimble. You are the young vigilante Deku. Why don't you join me? We both are like-minded people, Stain offered. I'm nothing like you. Izuku thrust his hands trying to grab the villain. Stain maneuvered around the invisible force swiftly. Izuku ended up grabbing nothing, but something did make its home in his shoulders. Izuku cried out in pain as he dropped to one knee. He wasn't going to let this stop. He got back on all feet. Staggering a bit, Stain swung his blade. Izuku jumped back, narrowly escaping every swing. The man nicked him across the face, drawing blood. The wound didn't look like it would scar, but it drawed enough blood for Stain. Izuku activated Eraser, only to close his eyes once more as Eraser swung his blade to remove his eyes. Izuku unconsciously moved back, closing his eyes. The hilt of the blade came down on his injured shoulder. The boy cried out in pain as he dropped in pain, only to find himself frozen. His body had went rigid. He couldn't break through. Stain got a taste of his blood. He cursed his bad luck and willed himself to move, but it wasn't moving. Saturn wasn't in his view. He couldn't do anything. He felt helpless. He hated this feeling. He didn't feel like this. I'll offer once more, Saturn said, his voice dripping with malice. Join me. Izuku gritted his teeth and he forced a grin. Over my dead body, he spat right back. If you insist. Stain raised his blade up, ready to stab the boy. Izuku gritted his teeth as he could feel the incoming force. But STSTO stop, Ingenium struggled to say. Izuku looked to the hero. His eyes went wide with surprise. Begging me to not kill another scum of society, Stain asked the turbo hero. Izuku needed to find help. The man was dying. That boy isn't scum, he's just a child, and an innocent victim. Ingenium began to cough up his blood. Stop, don't say anymore, Izuku shouted out, tears brimming in his eyes. You're really kind, kid, Ingenium said with a smile and heavy eyes. Leave the boy alone. Like you said, you both are like-minded, then you would know what that boy has gone through. Unlike you, he hasn't walked the road of no return, and he won't spare the child. Ingenium, stop, save your strength. Lita is waiting for you, Izuku cried out as tears began to trickle down. It's okay, cough, kid, the hero told him. If you want to go so badly, then be my guest, Stain said. He began to walk towards Ingenium. He stabbed down on Izuku's uninjured shoulder, rendering his hands useless. He moved over to Ingenium. Izuku's head was throbbing with pain. He couldn't activate Eraser. He saw the villain raise the blade over the pro. In that instant, Izuku saw flashbacks of his mother, dead on the floor. In her puddle of blood, Ingenium was in his own puddle of blood. He remembered his mother with stab wounds. Ingenium was stabbed in several places. One stab from the back to the heart had ended his mother's life. The blade of the villain was right over that spot on the hero. Time seemed to have slowed down as Stain began to plunge the blade down on the hero. With all his might, Izuku screamed out, "Stop!" Everything around him got blasted away. Stain and his blades was thrown back and slammed against the wall. Glass shattered, people were thrown back as was vehicles and others. Izuku was losing blood. His head was dizzy. Ingenium had stopped moving and looked passed out. He prayed with all his heart to whatever deity or god still on his side that the pro was going to live. Ingenium was one of the true ones. The distant wails of a siren were heard. Izuku felt relieved, and with that brief feeling of relief Izuku had passed out. Naomasa was in the area when suddenly a strange force moved his car. People almost crashed into each other. Some did, but there was no major incidents. Something wasn't right and people began to panic as they thought it was a villain. He called the ambulance to come to the area quickly. As he began to search for the cause of the phenomena, he switched on the sirens and searched. He stopped by an alley. His gut was telling him to go down. He made his way out the car and hurried down the path. To his shock and horror, the pro-hero Ingenium was down, and not far from him was vigilante Deku, both severely injured and losing blood. He called the ambulance. Their pulses were slowing down. He gritted his teeth as he began to administer first aid. There was blood everywhere, and not far from the two was another, but that hero had long passed. From the wounds, he deducted they were fighting the same villain, the hero killer most likely. The ambulances finally came and all were rushed to the hospital. He went with Izuku to make sure he wasn't recognized and was safe. He'd get the full story about what happened. Aizawa did mention the kid was going to be in the same area, but to run into him like this out all the possibilities. He was starting to think that the world had something against the kid. Both were rushed into the ER. Izuku was in need of blood transfusion. He also had a concussion. And there were also signs of dangerous quirk overuse. The bleeding through the nose and eyes was something shocking to see as the boy began to cough up blood. If Deku was awake, he'd be screaming in pain from his throbbing head. Ingenium was in need of numerous treatments. It didn't look so good for him. His spine was damaged, and it didn't look like he'd be getting up anytime soon. When both were stabilized, Izuku had fallen into deep sleep. An oxygen mask hooked up to him because the boy had trouble breathing. Lita Tensei was awake, however. "Ingenium, thank God," Naomasa said, thankful the guy was going to be okay. "The kid," was the hero's first words in his wake. "He seemed to have overused his quirk, but he'll be fine." "What happened?" Naomasa asked. "Stain happened. The kid found me and saved me the last minute, but Stain also got to him." Naomasa got all the information he needed. He told the man to rest and left the room. Lita had just lost to Todoroki when he got a call from his mother. The horror and dread he felt when he got the news of his brother. He ran out the stadium right after, only to bump into his teacher. "Lita," Aizawa called, surprised. "Sensei, I'm sorry, I need to go," he said, getting back up. "We are going to the same place. Mick's car is over there, let's go," Aizawa ordered, and Lita was left surprised. "My brother," Lita began as Aizawa began driving. Lita didn't say any more as he could see worry and dread plastered on the man's face. He then remembered that Izuku had left shortly after his battle with Shinso of Class C. He felt more dread after realizing. "Sir, did something happen to Aiza, Izuku-kun?" he asked with worry. "From what I got, he and your brother were attacked by Stain." Lita didn't say any more as they made their way to the station. They sat silent throughout the whole train ride, and when they got to Hosu Hospital they went their separate ways. Lita went straight to his brother, and Tensei gave him the dreaded news that he couldn't feel his legs. His time as a hero now over. Aizawa was in a far more delicate state. Izuku still hasn't woken up. He overused his telekinesis. The strain may have damaged his brain. Not only that, but there may be some nerve damage in his hands, where Stain had stabbed and left fatal wounds. Whether he was going to wake up was a question being asked. Hooked up to the heart monitor, his heartbeat was slow. He looked so pale due to all the blood he lost. So pale and so fragile. It broke Aizawa's heart to look at him. His breathing was so shallow that he didn't look like he was breathing. The oxygen mask strapped to his face being his lifeline. When Lita came to visit, he too fell to grief as he watched his friend hooked up to those machines. He called Uraraka and told her about what happened to Deku. He even told her how he got himself into that situation. Uraraka in turn told the class. There was a variation of reactions within the class. "What?" Kaminari had shouted. "Uraraka, you gotta be kidding, right?" he asked. The girl had tears in her eyes. "I'm going to the hospital. The teachers asked, tell them just to track me there." he said, and left right after many of the class had guilty expressions, especially the Baku squad. I'm going to, so see you all later, Uraraka said and left. They were all in a waiting room, and just down the hallway, Izumi had overheard everything she heard about Deku. Her younger twin brother was nothing she heard from Dragon. Bakugo Katsuki had won by default because Todoroki had decided to accompany Kaminari and Uraraka to the hospital in Hosu. Too many things happened that day that he didn't feel like receiving the award. Izumi had defeated Tokoemi by pushing him out of bounds and then lost to Bakugo. So she had come third, but as she stood there beneath Bakugo, she could feel the waves of guilt radiating off him. She too began to feel guilty. When she went home that day, she decided to do more research. Dragon bought her an apartment, and so she lives alone. She only knew as much as Dragon had told her. She believed him because he portrayed himself as a caring man. But with the reactions Deku had shown her, she began to question things. Typing on her computer, she looked up information on Deku. Only his feats of beating pros half to death were shown. However, they were always had first aid administered before they arrive. Some of them even turned out for the better. Endeavor, for example. She thought it was a joke when she first heard it. When Endeavor was asked about it, usually he would most likely glare and probably smash the camera, but instead he told the press this. I let the child do as he pleased. Many questioned the man. What are you, Deku? Izumi asked. She compiled what she knew about the boy. The boy ran away at the age 13 after killing his mother. But the reaction from Izuku told her that he didn't kill her, and he also heard everything that was said. Izuku wasn't a murderer, so why was he blamed, and why did Dragon pin the blame on him? Dragon was on par with Endeavor, but because the people didn't like him very much, he was the number 4 hero. They were looking for evidence to tie Dragon to the murder of their mother. Dragon never told her about who her actual father is. She's not as smart as her brother. She accepts that Deku is her brother, because she has no knowledge of any other blood relatives, and family was the most important thing. A week had passed, and Izuku wasn't back in school. She had begun to feel guilty, and so during that weekend she went for a secret visit. That night she went to the hospital, wearing an oversized hoodie, skinny jeans, all black. Sneaking into the hospital is sorta illegal, but knowledge is power. When she saw her little brother, she felt more guilt than she thought she would have felt. An empty sleeping bag beside the bed told her that the hero course teacher was camping out in the hospital room. She needed to hurry. You all are probably wondering what she's about to do. As explained before, twins with the same quirks are rare, and when these exact quirks go against each other, great destruction occur. These twins also have other quirks. Whereas Izuku has limit break, which breaks all the limiters in his body, Izumi has link. She can share her lifeline with someone she chooses. When this happens, she can look through that person's mind. Before her, through Izuku's eyes, she watched as Izuku's life began. She heard Mother's voice for the first time. I'm sorry, Izuku, your big sister can't stay with us. Izuku couldn't see, but he could hear. He probably doesn't remember, but these were the locked and lost memories. Through Link, Izumi could feel what Izuku could feel. She felt understanding. The baby laughter Izuku gave broke her heart. As time went by, Izuku's was anything but happy. The boy looked up to heroes, but one hero, that was Dragon, he didn't like. At home it was hell, at school was hell. As time went on, Izuku got his quirks. It was also that day he learned Dragon wasn't his father. The words said revealed who their father was. Izuku had found their father, Aizawa Shota. Izuku's whole life was hell. She watched them all and felt all his pain. Her heart stopped for a moment when she saw the memory of finding their dead mother. She could feel the boy's pain at that time. Grief, horror, emptiness, and more. His mother, the only person that cared for him, was gone, and his body moved on his own to save him. He ran and ran. That day was raining and he passed out in an alley not long after. A few days went by and it broke her heart when she heard Deku decided to throw himself off the roof, but it never happened as a villain saved him. And the words he told that villain would forever have a place in her mind. She looked through all the memories that came and was happy the boy was found and had begun to gain friends and more. She needed to bring the boy back. Drawing away from the boy's memories, she looked for him. In the smallest corner of the boy's mind where no light shined, she found him. He was a frail-looking boy, so small, so fragile. Izuku, she called out, getting to her knees. Who are you? The boy questioned. He was shaking in fear. His fatal state broke Izumi's heart even more. She wished she was there, asked why she was saved and not him. Izuku, it's okay, I won't hurt you. To Izuku, her voice and face and figure looked just like his mother. Mom, he questioned as he slowly moved his hands away from his eyes, but it was not his mother. Afraid to be beaten, he scurried back. It's okay, I'm your sister, Nei-chan, you know. she said with a smile. "Nei-chan," Izuku questioned as he began to ease up. "I won't hurt you, it's okay, you're safe," she told the. Izuku hesitantly took a few steps forward and stumbled into Izumi's arms. The warmth was like his mother's and he felt safe. Izumi wrapped her arms around him and held him close. Tears trickled down her cheeks as she held the small boy. I'm sorry, she repeated as she cried. "Why are you crying, Nei-chan?" Izuku asked, pushing away. "Because I'm bad person. I believed the wrong person and I was never there," she told Izuku. "But Nei-chan didn't hurt me, and now Nei-chan is here," little Izuku said with the brightest smile. Those few words struck her like a lightning bolt. She was here now and nothing is stopping her from helping him now. "That's right, Nei-chan is here now," she told him. "I'll take care of you now, back then it was you, now leave it to me," she told him. Taking his small hand in hers, they both decided to walk towards the light. Aizawa had gone to get coffee. He had decided to camp beside his son's bedside till he woke. It's been a week now and his friends and students were telling him to get proper rest. When he opened the door, the window was open and the wind blew and curtains ruffling it. Savage instinct took over and he rushed to the window, about to jump out and track whoever came to visit because he knew that window was closed when he left. Only to stop at softest sound of his son waking up. Izuku woke to blinding light. He had a strange dream. It was like his mom came to visit him, told him it was going to be okay. She apologized to him, and promised he would be there for him. His head was sore and he felt numb and extremely weak, but he pushed himself up anyway. He was faintly aware of his father throwing his arms around him as he sat up, not having much strength and seeking for warmth, and his father, as well. He leaned into him. He felt safe in his father's arms. Numerous things were beside Izuku when he woke. He had woken up and got embraced by his father, but then he gone back to sleep. This time finally he stayed up. That strange dream of his mom was still fresh in his mind. It was just so foggy. He wasn't quite sure it was his mother, but now to the questioning scene before him. There were gifts all over and get well cards as well. "They are all for you, little listener," Mike shouted, without his quirk, as he walked in. Aizawa right behind him. Mike was an uncle to Izuku, Midnight was an aunt. "From who?" Izuku asked, completely baffled. "Why, from me, of course," the man laughed. Izuku let out a sigh. Actually, in truth, he felt a bit disappointed. Aizawa silently giving him a cup of water and sits on the bed. "Well, actually most of them are from your classmates," Mike says. Izuku spits out all the water he was drinking. "What, why?" he asked, utterly shocked. It was then the door to the room suddenly burst open to reveal Uraraka rushing in. Immediately she threw her arms around Izuku and hugged him tight. "Oh, thank God you're okay," she cried. Izuku was completely shocked from the sudden embrace. He wasn't sure whether to hug back. His hands hovered over her back. A tap on his shoulders by Aizawa told him it was okay. And so the boy hugged back. He liked the girl's warmth and melted into it. Since the first day of school, Uraraka had always been so kind to him. She wasn't unsure or beat around the bush. She took the bull by the horns head on and faced the infamous vigilante Deku and befriended him. The clearing throat came and everyone turned to see Kaminari by the door. "Should we all leave and give you two some more time?" He snickered. Both boy and girl quickly retract their arms at lightning speed and Uraraka plastered herself to the wall. Both were beat red. Kaminari and present Mike couldn't help but laugh out loud. Most of Class 1A was there to bring more gifts. "Aizawa-kun," Lita spoke up. Izuku turned to him after everyone had filed in. The boy bowed at a 90 angle, shocking the other. "I can't thanks enough," he says with tears. Lita, "Wait, stop." Izuku was shocked from the gesture. "Please raise your head," he called out. Izuku tried to stand too and walked to Lita to push him back up, but he ended up stumbling and the person that caught him somewhat shocked them all. This person was the closest to the person that had seen Izuku as an enemy since day one. Kirishima helped Deku back up and onto the bed. Izuku himself was completely shocked. "We also owe you an apology," he said in a solemn voice. "There is nothing to apologize about," Izuku tried to argue. "No man, we have to," came Siro. "We all have to apologize," came Mina. In that moment all of Class 1A present bowed at Izuku. "We are sorry," they all chorused. Izuku was baffled and didn't know how to react. He sat frozen in his bed. Present Mike and Aizawa were now standing by the door. "We're sorry for judging you before getting to know you," came Kirishima. "We're sorry for thinking of you as a villain," came Tokoimi. "We're sorry making you feel like an outcast," came Yoyorozu. "We're sorry for not becoming friends sooner," came Ajiri, and finally, "We're sorry for not reaching out sooner," came Todoroki. Izuku's throat felt clogged. He didn't know what to say. He felt happy. He felt relieved. He felt as though a heavy weight had lifted off his shoulders. "You know," came Uraraka. Bakugo may have given you the name Deku because it sounds like he's calling you useless, but I think the name is kinda cute, she says with a smile, confusing everyone. It sounds like a Japanese word for I can do it Dikairu, you know, she says, pumping up her fist. I guess it does. Azui seconds. They all turned to Izuku and everyone could see it, clear as day. The boy was crying. Izuku too wasn't fully aware he was. When he felt the tears streaming down his cheeks, he was surprised. What the hell? He asked himself as he wiped away the stray tears. They kept on pouring down as he struggled to wipe them all away. All he knew was that he was happy all this time. The name was a reminder of what he thought he was, a useless and worthless boy. To think all it took was for a girl to change it for him. Thanks. Izuku didn't know what else to say. They left the boy to rest up some more. He'd be discharged soon. Uraraka was walking home with Azui and Lida. Ochako-chan, I have a question to ask, Azui asks. Sure, what is it? The girl replied. Why weren't you never afraid of Izuku-chan? Asked the frog girl. How what? Uraraka lets out startled. I too have been wondering the same all this time. It was also you who made us befriend Aizawa-kun in the first place. Lida thought for short a moment. I believe it's only befitting I thanks as well, Lida says as he bows to Uraraka. Lida, stop. Really, you don't have to. Uraraka panicked, completely flustered. But can you please explain, Ochako-chan? It's nothing really, the girl says. She begins to play with her fingers as she told her tale. It's just that he saved me once. I don't think he'd remember, but he saved me from a couple guys that tried to kidnap me. What? Lida practically shouted. My family had many debts back then, but now everything is fine now, Uraraka assures Lida. Anyway, it was winter, and it was really cold, and they had taken me to some warehouse, and then that was when Deku showed up. He beat those guys till they were out and took me away. Uraraka says with a slight blush. He brought me back to my neighborhood. It was a coincidence actually. He then wrapped his scarf around me and told me to stay safe. That was my first encounter with him, she says with a chuckle. That wasn't your first time? Azui asked. It was really dark back then, so we both couldn't get a good look at each other's faces. The second time was apparently right before the exam in the day. I tripped on myself and he caught me with his quirk. He was wearing a disguise though. How did you know it was him? His words, I guess, she tells them. He told me it'd be bad luck if I fell. Not only that, but he told me to stay safe, she says with a smile. The other two couldn't help but smile back at her. Then they stopped in their tracks. He was there for the exam, Lida shouted. More like roaming around the school. He wasn't allowed to know anything about the exam. Well, that was what he said, says Uraraka as she laughed. Monday morning finally came. Lida was asking usual first in class. And when finally everyone was back, they waited for their teacher and his son. Izuku would be returning to school today. Uraraka was excited to see him. Lida too, to an extent. The others were finally ready to warm up to him. They hoped that they managed to break down some of the walls the boy had built to block out others. The moment Aizawa entered the classroom, all was silent. He turned around and found that no one was behind him. The man sighed. Get in here already, the man ordered. Izuku trotted in, looking so much more innocent. Yes, that was the only way to describe him. Usually he'd have a smug look plastered on his face. His hair would usually always be jet black and truly messy, and there would be extremely dark circles under his eyes. His eyes usually looked like a dead fish, and he'd always wear a dark hoodie over his uniform, or he'd completely discard the uniform. He still wore his black fingerless gloves though. Now his hair was greener, and there was an effort to fix it. The dark circles under his eyes were still there but almost non-existent. His eyes were brighter. He wore his uniform. His whole uniform. Nothing was missing or added on. His usual smug look was gone. What replaced his face was a somewhat shy and flustered look. He played with his fingers and looked down to the floor. GGGG. He was trying to say something. The class seemed to have gone silent and awaited for what his words would be. Izuku suddenly bowed at a 90-degree angle, shocking the whole class. Good morning, everyone, he shouted out. And I'm sorry for acting like a complete jerk from the first time I started attending UA. It was as though Izuku did a complete 180 on his personality. Bakugo was shocked the most. It was as though he was looking at the boy that he was once friends with. It was a time that felt as though it was another life. A time when they were all equal. A time they both would smile at each other. It was as though the old Izuku was coming back. The innocent hero-loving boy that had the power to make many smile along with him. Kaminari walked up to him. The boy sandwiched the other's face. He started pulling his cheeks and messing around with it. Wak Wong Kamawani-kun, Izuku said through a squashed face. It's him. Kaminari shouted, completely shocked. It's really him, the boy shouted again, and this time the class went, huh. That can't be him, Mina shouted, eyes almost bursting out her sockets. What do you mean, it is me? Izuku tried to argue. But what happened to your jerk-like image, your asshole image? Jiraiya asked, air quoting. Izuku grew red at that. I'm kinda really sorry about that too, he says, looking down to the floor. I adopted that persona when I ran and it became a part of me, so when I'm scared of nevers I start acting like that. This revelation shocked everyone. Izuku was always scared and nervous around them, so those times when he got overexcited when All Might came were the times the real him showed that day. Everyone got to know the real Izuku. He was jumpy, seemed to be easily spooked. Uraraka found him cute. Aizawa thought he was living a dream. Izuku was just like Inko. The real him was just like Inko. Mike had crashed with them last night, and when the two woke to have had breakfast, it was already made, and Izuku wasn't the Izuku they had gotten used to. With a bright smile he greeted them and welcomed them to have breakfast. It's safe to say 2 cups of coffee was wasted in the morning at the Aizawa household, and 2 men had fainted from shock. So the boy finally came out his shell. The walls he had built have been broken down to an extent. It was mostly in class or when he was only surrounded by his classmates would act like the real him. And finally the lesson for the day. They were going to pick her names. Everyone was ecstatic when Midnight walked in, and Izuku was all smiles when his classmates went up till there was no one else to go. We still have 2 students to go, says Midnight. Only 2 students in class are confused, and that's Kaminari and Izuku. 2, but everyone went up already, said Kami. You dingus, you and Aizawa didn't have your turn yet, Jiraiya pointed out, hovering her ear jack near the blonde's face. Both students went. We're on rehab. With our records I don't think we can become heroes, Izuku explained. Nonsense. Midnight shouted and tossed 2 boards to Kaminari and Izuku. Kaminari caught it with his head and fell back onto the floor. Izuku caught it with his quirk before it made it home on his face. The rehab project isn't just paying for your wrongs by doing community service. It's turning you law-bending brat of vigilantes into law-abiding pro-heroes, says Midnight as she struck a pose. Izuku and Kaminari jaw drop. We didn't tell you guys because we were sure you'd yeet yourself out of UA in an instant. Izuku stood up to make a point, but then retracted his hands and sat down humbly. He looked to Kami. The boy gave a nod, knowing they were thinking the same thing. They would have totally yeeted themselves out one way or another back then. Point taken, Izuku says, and Kaminari seconds it by nodding. The class sweat dropped. They would have totally yeeted themselves out of UA. They thought Kaminari was up first, going with Charge Bolt. And finally Izuku. He thought long and hard and decided to just go with name he's been going by all this time, Deku. You sure? Asked Kaminari. Yeah, I'd been using it for so long it only felt natural. And Uraraka changed it for me. I honestly can't think of another name, he says, scratching the back of his head in the back. Uraraka couldn't help but feel the blood rush to her face. She felt happy she could do something for him, and that he could be happy with it. She had a teary smile on her face as she gave Izuku a thumbs up from the back. Izuku noticed and simply smiled back. Back at the hospital he promised to forever protect her smile. You all will having internships now, said Aizawa. Everyone was at the train station and their teacher was saying a couple of words before they would go. Listen to your supervisors, he emphasized. Mostly to Izuku and Kaminari. Don't worry, we'll be fine, and listen, Izuku said in a deadpan voice. Gran Torino isn't someone to mess with anyway, he said under his breath as he looked away. Everyone went their separate ways, but before Izuku could leave, Aizawa stopped him for a little chat. You know, Lita might go after Stain. I actually want to go after him myself, Izuku shot back. There was ghost pain radiating from his shoulders. I'm giving you permission to use your quirk. It's just a precaution if you actually get caught. And in hero gear, make sure to keep your face hidden. And here's one last addition to your gear. Aizawa took of his binding gear and gave it to Izuku. The boy looked dumbstruck. It's actually brand new. I wanted to surprise why. Aizawa got cut by Izuku hugging him. He could feel his shirt getting wet. He sighed and pushed him back and kneeled down so he could look into his eyes. Izuku didn't want to look up, so he had to. Were you always such a crybaby? Aizawa asked. Izuku struggled to wipe away the tears. You changed, and it's for the better, and I'm glad to see that. So don't be afraid every time you start the waterworks. I know, but still it's embarrassing, Izuku said, hiding his face. Aizawa gave a smirk and stood up straight. He ruffled the boy's hair and slapped him on his back, pushing him forward. Your train is about to leave. Hurry up and go be a hero. Aizawa had returned to his deadpan tone. Izuku gave him a smile, even though it couldn't be seen with the mask on. But with a smile on his voice he shouted out, See you later, Dad. Izuku stood in front of Gran Torino's home. He brought taiyaki as peace offering. The man was super pissed when he had come to visit him in the hospital. He was afraid of entering and then getting squared like a bug. He entered. Gran Torino was nowhere to be seen. The room was dark. Gran Torino, Izuku stuttered. He entered. Nothing but silence. Izuku couldn't see in the dark. Instantly Izuku turned and blocked, because every time he walked through the front door he'd get squared from the back. But today nothing came, instead pain as though he got whacked with a stick came from his foot. Ouch, he shouted out, and then an whack to his foot, then a whack on his head. He dropped, and then another whack to his head. He groveled on the floor in pain, and finally the lights came on. It reminded him about Recovery Girl's treatment every time he did something suicidal in training. You bring me taiyaki then try to go get yourself killed. Gran Torino scoffed as he stood with his walking cane. Izuku glared at it. It was the most hated item old people could use to youngins like him. What was I supposed to do? Let Stain have his way? Izuku asked. No, you should have had a plan. Gran Torino whacked him on the head with the cane. I may be old enough, but I don't want to die from a heart attack. The old man scoffed. Deku couldn't imagine the old man dying anytime soon. Anyway, do you know why you are here? Izuku nodded with head and looked the pro in the eyes. I'm here to train Limit Break. Limit Break basically breaks all the limiters in my body, so I'm as strong as All Might when it's active, and I regenerate faster. So basically I'm like that Noma that attacked the Ust. I came here for you to train me so I could learn how to control it, since you thought All Might how to control his power. By the way, boy, how much do you know about All Might? I know All Might's real name is Yagi Tashinori. You were his teacher along with Shimuran Nana, who was also a pro hero, and that same pro hero was also my mother's biological mother, so that makes me one of Shimuran Nana's grandchildren. Actually, that also makes me your grandchild, since Mom was the result of you and Shimuran Nana's brief relationship, but she never told you because she didn't want to burden you and put Mom in the orphanage. Mom was then adopted because her quirk, and the bastard thought it'd be a great idea to have a child who would be able to breath and manipulate flames, and forced Mom into a quirk marriage. But back to All Might. All Might was once quirkless. Before Izuku could continue, Gran Torino had fainted from shock. Gran Torino, Izuku shouted. When the old pro woke, he looked like a fish out of water. Why didn't you tell me this before? He asked the boy. Izuku simply bonked his head and stuck out his tune, saying, Teehee, I forgot. Gran Torino grew a irk mark and bonked Izuku on the head 3 times really hard. Izuku laid sprawled on the floor. You have to tell me these things. Gran Torino was furious. He believes Izuku, because the boy always told him the truth. Most of the time. I'm sorry. Before Dad and everyone, you believed me. I didn't want to give you any more trouble. I wanted to know more about my mom, so that's how I found out. I traced it everything back. And I found out about Shimuran Nana, and All Might and you. Izuku apologized with his head down. We better find a way to put that bastard behind bars for good then, and tell me everything from now on. The old man ordered. Yes, sir, Izuku answered. Now let's eat the taiyaki before it gets cold, he said with a slight sniffle. Izuku grew a grin and went to get the plates. Okay, Brad, tell me what Limit Break is like, Gran Torino asks. Well, it's like a rip-off version of One for All, Izuku says. It breaks down all the limiters in my body, my strength, my regeneration rate, my quirk limits as well, Izuku tells him. But in doing so you become a madman, Gran Torino sighs. To think he's talking with his grandson he never knew he had. Today has been quite an emotional rollercoaster for him. By the way, Gramps, the truth is I found out about this about a year ago. I was really shocked too, but happy I found family, Izuku says with a giddy smile. Gran Torino smiles and then. Okay, let's get to work. I recommend you asking All Might for some tips, that if he can give any, Gran Torino says. Hey, what do you think All Might's reaction would be if told him about everything? Izuku was looking to mess with people. He might have a heart attack, Gran Torino says instantly. What? Izuku says worried. He doesn't his favorite hero to die because of him. It's a joke, don't worry too much, brat. But he will be shocked beyond his mind. Nana was like a mother to him anyway. Gran. No, sorry, Torino says with a smile. Izuku sits and thinks about what was just said. A smile graces his face as he begins to rock back and forth. What's wrong? The old pro asks. That means All Might is like an uncle, Izuku says a bit giddily. Okay, now let's get to work, Sorahiko ordered. Stain was scouring the city when he senses something behind him. Instantly he draws his blade and slices, but nothing. My master wishes to speak to you, came Kurojiri. The warp gate didn't hide his distaste for the man for what he did to Deku. Honestly, it was taking every single willpower he had to not rip this man apart with his quirk. He brought the man to the bar where he would meet with Shigaraki. Things didn't go so well, but Stain still somehow joined in. Shigaraki still wasn't very pleased. That night when everything was silent, Kurogiri left his post. In an alley waiting for him was Erasure Head and the detective. "Anything for us to know about since you called?" asked Aizawa. "Indeed, it seems the vigilante stain has just joined the league." Kurogiri was trying to stay neutral, but he couldn't help hide the distaste in his voice, a sentiment he could share with Aizawa at the moment. "Is there any more information you can give us? Anything about what's happening?" asked the detective. "There will be an attack soon in Hosa by Nomus," says Kurogiri. The detective froze at that. He needed to contact the heroes in the area to be on guard. Aizawa was curious about something. Why was Kurogiri like this and helping them? "Can you tell me why a villain like you is helping us, and why can't you just break away from the villains?" Aizawa asked. "Apparently it's my mission to take care of Shigaraki Tamura. I cannot disobey my orders even if I wanted, but I still have enough free will to things as please." Kurogiri answered. "What do you mean, your mission?" the detective asked. "I am a Nomu, I believe the first sentient one. With my quirks and my roots persona I was created to be a caretaker. But knowing what I am, it seems I may have some bugs allowing my free will. Knowing what I am and having the capability to speak, and mostly though I've never tried before, resist my benefactor's orders. I have not told Izuku about, by the way." Aizawa and Tsukachi looked beyond shocked. Kurogiri was a Noma. "What do you mean by roots persona?" Aizawa asked. "Who I was when I was alive," Kurogiri answered. "What do you mean by that?" Tsukachi questioned. "Nomas are made by using corpses of villains and heroes reanimated into living sentient marionettes. I giving you this information means, as I said, I have some bugs," Kurogiri says. Aizawa and the detective looked sick. "Do you remember anything from when you were human then?" Aizawa asked. If only he knew he was going to regret that question. "I only remember my name and nothing else." The mist on Kurogiri began to dissipate. No, it looked like it was being sucked and Kurogiri was becoming whole. It revealed a pale man about the same age as Aizawa. He looked nothing like one would imagine Kurogiri to look like as human. His hair was white as clouds reaching up and turning into mist. He had a gentle smile on his face as he reintroduced himself. Aizawa felt his heart stop. It couldn't be his past that he left behind. This man before him was once his friend, the reason he was able to become a hero. "I was formerly known as Shirokamo Oboro," Kurogiri says, then turns back into his misty form. Aizawa is frozen in his spot. "Well then I must be going," Kurogiri says. "Wait," Aizawa says, a bit panicked. The villain and detective looked at him confused. Aizawa didn't know what to say. His mind was too boggled to think up anything. But there was something he had to say. Both villain and detective was quite shocked when Aizawa bowed down to the said villain. "Thanks. Thanks for everything, for the past and present." Kurogiri nodded in acknowledgement. In that brief moment the villain realized that this man, this hero, most likely knew who and what he was in the past. He may not remember, but Aizawa thanked him for helping him in the past and helping his son now in the present. "We have more work now, huh?" the detective asks. "We do," Aizawa says with a sigh. "That's it, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. With that, take care.